right, and I think Mike Ryan is going to start. Is the screen showing what it should be showing?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
It is, Beth. Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Certainly, just bear with us a little bit. There are some Zoom restrictions that the Weather Service has, so Beth is going to be forwarding the slides for myself and for Sam. But what we wanted to do here, and I know a number of the folks that are on the call, we know and we've met. Pleased to have so many others that are joining us from the agricultural field. It's good for us to meet all the partners and end users. And so what we wanted to do this morning was just show you and give you a little bit of a taste of what we can provide from the Weather Service for the end users, the products and other services. And so what I'm going to do is start out with just kind of a broader viewpoint of the entire Weather Service and some of the larger scale products, and then transition to Sam, and he'll focus in a little bit more on some of the products that we provide strictly at the Indianapolis office to the end users. So again, I'm a senior meteorologist at the office in Indianapolis. Sam is the warning coordination meteorologist, and again, we appreciate the opportunity not only to be a part of the workshop and put it together, but also to interact with all of you. So go ahead and you can flip the slide there, Beth, or whoever it is who's got it. I want to start out with our mission statement, which many of you may be aware of already. But essentially, service is in our name, and so we provide that to our partners, and our main number one mission is the protection of life and property and the enhancement of the national economy. The way we do that, that's probably most visible to everyone on the call, is the issuing of warnings, short fuse warnings during the spring and summer, such as severe thunderstorm, tornado, and flash flood warnings, where we're looking at an immediate threat to life and property. Winter weather products, winter storm warnings during the winter. But this broadens out to providing information that can aid in decisions to our partners. And over the last 5 to 10 years, the Weather Service has transitioned into a much more proactive effort in decision support services that we can provide, products, data that the end user, our partners, have access to and helps them in making their decisions, whatever that may be. And certainly that slides right into the climate services arena, not only with agriculture, which is our focus here for this workshop, but many of the other facets of climate service. And that could be water resources, that could be climate change, that could be a number of different items. Okay, next slide. There are 6 offices, Weather Service offices, that cover the state of Indiana. Wherever you are in the country, you are covered by a Weather Service office. There are 122 offices nationwide. We maintain 24/7, 365 operations. So if you were to attempt to call the office at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning, you are going to get somebody. And what you list here, what other federal agency can you reach out to at any time of the day or night, whether it's a holiday? And that's something that's important to us and part of our mission. Now, of the 6 offices, there are 2 offices that are located actually within the state and that cover the bulk of the state. The first is the Northern Indiana office in the pink shading. That's up in Kosciuszko County, and you can see they cover a large chunk of the northern part of the state. And then our office located out by the Indianapolis airport in the green, we cover the majority of the central part of the state, from the Illinois to over towards the Ohio border, from roughly Lafayette, Kokomo, Muncie, south down to Vincennes and Seymour. And then Chicago has a few counties in northwest Indiana. Paducah covers the Evansville area and southwest Indiana counties. Louisville has a number of counties in the southern part of the state, and then Wilmington, Ohio has 8 counties in the southeast part of the state that border in on the Cincinnati and Dayton metro areas. So this is an opportunity wherever you're located within the state. This is information that will allow you to reach out to whichever Weather Service office that you're covered by. That being said, if for some reason a request or information worked its way to us, we could then pass it along to whoever needed to know with the different offices. And there are a number of our folks from other offices that are on this workshop. I saw folks from Louisville, Paducah, and Wilmington. Not sure if we have anybody from Chicago and Northern Indiana on, but they're all on here. And one other thing I didn't mention is the Wilmington office is co-located with the Ohio River Forecast Center, which focuses specifically on hydraulic forecasts, forecasts for the rivers, and research in that arena. And I know we have a number of folks here today that are on that call, or from that office as well. Okay, next slide. So the next few slides, just want to briefly mention a couple of the products that you have access to. Some of this has already been discussed from yesterday. Of course, this is the items on the drought.gov website that Molly highlighted in her talk yesterday. And you can see there's a lot of really good information regarding NIDIS and different drought-related products that you can break down to the state and county level. And Molly even showed how you can break that down to the city level. And so we have links to that via our page as well. And I'll mention, you'll see QR codes on the lower right-hand side of the some of these slides. That can, if you scan those, that will provide the links to all the information that are on these pages here. So feel free. Next slide. Some specific weather service products and services, a number of them come out of the Weather Prediction Center, and that's where I want to spend a little bit of my time. We're not going to talk a whole lot really about the Climate Prediction Center because there's going to be a talk on that a little later this morning where we'll go into greater detail there. But the Weather Prediction Center, and again, just use the QR code and you can access the website down there. It's one of our national centers. It's located in Silver Spring, Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C., and it provides a lot of information, particularly when it comes to the hydrology side of things, rainfall forecast, rainfall potential going out over the next 2, 3, out to 7 days and even beyond. Next slide. A couple of specific products that would be of interest to some of our agricultural end users that we have on the workshop here. The quantitative precipitation forecast for the country, which is updated a couple of times a day. It's expected precipitation over various time periods, and you see that listed there. You can get them for each day or for a 2 or 3, 5-day period out to 7 days. And it just shows some of the expectations of what is likely to fall over the next 7 days based on the most up-to-date forecast data. And this is an image that was from back a few weeks ago in May, and you can see in the blue and the purples and the oranges, reds, that's where we have the threat for much larger rainfall amounts over that 7-day period. And if you remember, that was back when we had a lot of the very heavy rainfall and flooding that took place off the northern Gulf Coast, especially across Texas and Louisiana, and then stretching north up into the Missouri Valley. During this time frame here in Indiana, we didn't see much of that, and that was forecast very well. As you can see there, the majority of the state was only expected to have 1/4 to 1/2 inch during that week period, and I think that's roughly where we ended up. Okay, next slide. The Weather Prediction Center also issues excessive rainfall outlooks, and they'll issue this for the first 3 days from when the forecast is issued. And again, it's just an opportunity to provide more specific information of concerns for excessive rainfall, for heavier rainfall over a shorter period of time that may lead to anywhere from nuisance flooding up to flash flooding. And so this is an image again from, I believe, a week ago, where the focus for the heaviest rainfall, there was a greater concern there across Illinois and then extending back into the southern plains, and that was where the slight risk was issued. And you can see what the risk protocols are down on the lower level. Marginal, slight, moderate, and high are typically levels that you don't see very often unless there's a very strong signal or signals for heavy rainfall and flooding. And that might be a situation you would see with maybe a landfalling hurricane, for instance. But marginals and slights are more common. And I'm not for certain, but with the rainfall we had yesterday, I think we were within a marginal here in the state. And of course, across the southeast half of the state, we had 1 to 2 inches over a large part of the area. Okay, next slide. Taking it down even further to a shorter time scale, the Weather Prediction Center also issues mesoscale precipitation discussions. And for those who are familiar with the Storm Prediction Center and some of the products they provide, it's essentially the same kind of a discussion, the same format that you would see from SPC with severe thunderstorms, with potential for a watch being issued, or basically an outlook for whether we expected storms to intensify or weaken or remain the same over a few hours. And again, it's issued on an as-needed basis. It's over a smaller timescale, as I mentioned, in a smaller area. And this is an example, again, going back to the really heavy rain and flooding conditions that we had down along the northern Gulf Coast about 10 days ago. This was just a smaller scale product showing the concerns for very heavy rainfall and thunderstorms that were regenerating over the same area across southeast Louisiana and impacting the New Orleans area. So again, that's a product that's available via the Weather Prediction Center that you can access. And again, it can give you, kind of more confidence in a shorter time frame on, say, maybe a 1 to 3 to maybe as much as 6 hour time period of a greater threat for heavy rainfall and flooding and how that may impact you. Okay, next slide. Now on this slide, I'm gonna go through some of the stuff here and then transition over to Sam because we're gonna start talking more about the information that we provide specifically at Weather Service Indianapolis. And for some of our other colleagues who are on from surrounding offices, they all have climate information, climate areas on their website. They may provide some slightly different information than what we do, but I would just encourage you, whichever office that you're under their area, just check out their website when you have a chance and take a look at some of the data that they provide. And feel free to let them know or ask them if there's information that you'd like to see that maybe they don't have there, and maybe that's something we can all look at. We do try with some of the broader products to be very similar. We collaborate and we talk with our colleagues in the other offices all the time, and so we interact a lot. The climate services team here for the state of Indiana, which is one of the only ones in the country, has a lot of folks not just on the workshop here, but across the Weather Service here at 6 offices, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about climate service related issues here in the state. So we do talk a lot, and certainly information that you want to see, things you want to see, we can bring that up and discuss it and see what we can do. So just want to mention that via our website and via every Weather Service website, outlook, watch, warning, forecast information can be accessed easily 24/7. Frost and freeze products were briefly discussed yesterday. We do issue frost and freeze warnings typically in the spring and in the fall. It's probably of greatest concern to agricultural interests in the spring as we're starting to get green up and vegetation is becoming susceptible. We try to pay attention to that very closely. We used to have kind of a static start time for frost and freeze products, and over the last 5 to 10 years with the introduction of the VIP product via MRCC, that's gone to, we kind of move it around based on whatever's going on. And in fact, a couple of years ago, we started up frost and freeze products, I believe the 2nd or 3rd week of March, because things were starting to green up so fast. And there was concern that if we had any colder stretches later in March and into April, that we were going to run into a real significant frost and freeze risk. Drought outlooks, information statements, updates. I think all of that's been certainly mentioned yesterday. David Smith and some of the other folks briefly discussed the weekly partner collaboration on the drought conditions for the state with the drought call. Manuela discussed that. The Weather Service has a very big hand in that. We have direct input into the National Drought Monitor, as was discussed. And then just want to highlight the new climate normals, which came down the pike about a month ago. We've added information with that. Basically, every 10 years, we drop off the previous 10 years in the 30-year normals, and we add in the most recent 10 years. So we went from 1981 to 2010 to the period 1991 to 2020. And so all of that new information is available on our website and likely as well on the other Weather Service offices' websites with their climate locations. We also include weather event summaries and reviews. In fact, we're currently working on the May review and the spring season review, and we'll have that up on our website here probably in the next few days. And then just other items such as answering any data requests you have, questions, and we do a lot of public outreach and speaking engagements. Now, those have been virtual over the last year, but the hope is here either later this year or next year that we're back to doing in-person speaking engagements again and outreach. And with that, we can save questions for the end. I'll turn it over to Sam to bring you home.
All right, thanks, Mike. And we can go on to the next slide. And if you hear a little rumble in the background, we have a little thunderstorm moving through here. So it's a little loud. First time I've heard thunder, I think, in a month or two at least. So hopefully it won't disrupt that. But yeah, as Mike said, we kind of focused on a funnel down approach, started with the big picture of what the Weather Service can provide. And there's a lot more information on those pages Mike showed that we just can't go into detail with. So we really encourage you to check those out if you haven't already. But when it comes to your local area across the state, I've listed here all the Weather Service offices Mike pointed out earlier and their web addresses. So you can see all you really have to do is change the 3-letter identifier at the end. Or on our webpage, you'll see the map there on the left, and there's a small box there with arrows, and you can just click the arrows and quickly move to the next Weather Service office, north, south, east, or west, to get the information you want. So I just wanted to point that out there. Next slide, please. A lot of interesting tools on our local website. When you click on the map for your local area, it will bring up your local weather page. And from there, you'll get the 7-day forecast, both in text and graphical format. And then towards the bottom, there's a lot of other links. And one link is called the hourly weather graph. And this is a pretty popular interface. I admit it's graphically not the best. It's tough to read and takes a little bit of a learning curve to look at it. But you can customize this forecast and just select the parameters that impact your needs. So whether it's dew point, relative humidity, the probability of precipitation, wind speed or direction, you can tailor that by the little GUI that you see there on the screen. And then when you hit submit, it will bring up that graph that you see on the left-hand side. Now you can do this for multiple 48-hour periods. And I believe this goes out to about 3, maybe 4 days. And it pulls directly from our internal graphical forecast database, which is how we put the forecast together. So every time we update the forecast internally and publish that, this data will update automatically. So we have a requirement to update the near-term forecast at least once every 3 hours, 24/7. So we constantly have people looking at the forecast and making changes as the weather dictates. And you can't say that for a lot of other agencies or private entities out there that's doing a lot of automation. So we try to add that personal touch and always work on improving that forecast, especially in the first 3 to 6 hours. Okay, next slide, please. We understand, in the old days, we put out text forecast, the old zone forecast, as we call it, or the county forecast, and it was all words. And we know people like visuals, like those graphics, and we're transitioning towards that. We're by no means graphic experts, but we have a lot of new tools that are helping us create some really good images that we can post on social media on our website. So here's an example of what we call the weather story. We'll put a weather story out twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, and update it as needed. And then in addition to the weather story, we can create these graphical graphic casts, as we call them, that sort of enhance or explain in more detail what we talked about in the weather story. So this is from that event that Mike showed, the marginal heavy rain risk from last week. We outlined the part of central Indiana there that had the greatest risk. And then we included a map with our most likely rainfall amounts. Now, unfortunately, this forecast didn't quite pan out, and that's why it's a forecast. It was only a marginal risk. There was a lot of uncertainty, and Mike was actually on the midnight shift before this day began, and and pointed out we had concerns that the system heading towards us might split and go north and south, which indeed it did, and that cut down our rainfall amounts. And we put out, I don't have it listed here, but what we call a weather forecast discussion. So with every forecast, we update that every 3 to 6 hours. It's sort of the internal thinking. When you look at our forecast and see a 40% chance of thunderstorms today, why do we have that 40% chance of thunderstorms in there? You can read this forecast discussion available on our website, and it will give you that science and background into what our forecasters were thinking. So when you want a little bit more, you want to drill down, or you're just curious, I really recommend you check that product out to get more information on some of these graphics that we put out and what we're thinking. Okay, next slide, please. So we've tried to incorporate all of these elements that we've talked about, from the big picture down to the local picture, into what we're calling the Indiana Weather Briefing page. And you can see what it looks like here. There's the website listed below, and I really recommend you check this out. And we're always looking for input on what we can add to these websites, these local websites. So go on to the next slide. And once you start checking this out, please send us input, comments, thoughts on what else you'd like to see. You can send that to our webmaster email that's on all of our web pages at the bottom. But one of the tabs there is for local graphics. So we've incorporated, again, from every Weather Service office, from our forecast databases, we have a script that runs that puts all those forecasts together in one picture for the state. So here I've got a picture of high temperatures. On the left-hand side, you can see some of the parameters we're displaying. The probability of maximum temperature being greater than 90 degrees. You know, that becomes important for stress on crops. The heat index greater than 100. Those are the probabilities and chances for those type of parameters happening. So I really encourage you to look this page over and let us know what else might be useful we could add for these graphics. Next slide, please. One of the tabs on that page is the rainfall tab. So here we've tried to bring those graphics from the Weather Prediction Center down to our local level, so you don't have to go to multiple websites to get that. So this will just kind of localize and give you that quick look picture of what we're expecting precipitation wise. And then the map there at the top just shows any warnings, watches, or advisories that's in effect. I think that was a dense fog advisory that was in effect when I made that page there for the southern half of the state. Okay, next slide. And then based on our state climate team and our weekly meetings with state partners for input into the drought page, we created this page for all of Indiana. Even though the page says Central Indiana Drought Information, it really covers the entire state. Again, one-stop shopping. We've tried to bring all of these important drought tools and links and images into one page, so you can go through these different tabs and find a lot of the pages that have been talked about yesterday and today on this one page. All right, next slide. We also do local research at all of our Weather Service offices. So this is a project I've been working on for several years, and we're in the process of updating this with the most recent data. But we're looking here at the number of days per year with 3-inch or greater precipitation. So you saw this a little bit yesterday from the climate assessment that was done. Beth went over some of that, and we've just taken it a step further. And before that assessment came out, we were actually already working on this. But just looking, we took 20 cooperative weather stations across the state. These are our dedicated volunteers of co-op weather observers, and I tried to find 20 stations that had a really good period of record, not too many missing data points back to 1900, and just said, okay, how many 3-inch or greater one-day rainfall events have there been? And you can really see there in the trends a significant increase starting after 1980. Just a kind of a disturbing upward trend that matches all of the expectations with climate change and a wetter climate. And we're in the process of just looking at this in more depth and adding to this. But just some real eye-opening results when you start drilling down into the data. Okay, next slide, please. And then a couple things on the horizon. I showed you that hourly weather graph earlier. Then I mentioned I didn't quite like the graphical representation. So we're working on something similar here that's more of a table format, very similar elements. And those colored boxes will change colors based on the threshold levels that you see down below. So we currently are in a test mode for this. We have 3 stations going, and we plan to create one of these for every city, main city in each county. So the county seat, town or city will have one of these made, and we hope to get this done here later this summer and on our website. And it will probably be on the link on that Indiana weather briefing page. So you can go to the map, click your city, and get one of these nice detailed tables. Next slide, please. And then our regional headquarters is trying to take it actually a step further. This is really in the early phases, but this would allow you as the customer to go in and set your threshold levels for those color boxes. This would go out 7 days. You can select the parameters you want or need, and then select what that threshold level for your local needs, when you want to see it highlighted yellow or red to give you an alert that you might need to take some action. So this is part of our decision support services, where we provide you the information so you can make decisions that you need when you need to make them. All right, next slide. And then that's really just a nice summary. So weather.gov is the main site for the National Weather Service. You can get this map that comes up on that site, and then you just click anywhere on the country to get to your local National Weather Service. So if you're traveling, you want to know what the forecast is in some other part of the country, you can go here and get that information. So that's it from our end. I don't know if there's any questions, or if we probably took a little too much time there. Sorry, Beth, but we can move on if we need to.
All right, thanks, Mike and Sam. There are a couple questions, I think, in the chat box. So when you get a chance, if you don't mind looking through that, seeing if you can answer it. Also, I was wondering, you had mentioned Weather Ready Nation, and I can't remember if you said anything about, is there a way where people can sign up to say, get an email in their inbox every day of the stuff?
Yeah, great point. So yeah, for all businesses, organizations that take a proactive approach to weather, are concerned about weather for their employees, we have a program called Weather Ready Nation Ambassadors. So we can provide that link in the chat box. You can sign up, and the Indianapolis office for Central Indiana provides a daily weather briefing on what is expected really over the next 48 hours, and anything beyond that that's significant. So not all offices in Indiana are providing that daily email, but we are doing that for our Central Indiana ambassador partners. So we'll post that link over there. It's already there. Thank you, Melissa. And please, yeah, if you have an interest in weather, sign up.
Does everything look okay, David?
Yep, great. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. So I apologize that I'm not on camera. I actually had a flood in the house now a couple of months ago that destroyed most of the first floor, so it doesn't look pretty. So I'm just not going to be on. But let me say that it's my great pleasure to be here. I'm Dave DeWitt. I'm the director of the Climate Prediction Center, which is National Weather Service National Centers for Environmental Prediction, and we're located in College Park, Maryland. Next slide, please. So in this brief presentation, I intend to give you a high-level overview of our main areas of work at CPC, with an emphasis on the prediction products that you might currently use or might use in the future. So when speaking about these prediction products, I'm going to emphasize that on these timescales, which are week 2 or day 8 out to about 1 year, the predictions are characterized by what we would call relatively small signal and large noise, right? So there's more uncertainty, and hence the predictions are probabilistic. So I'll actually show something I call the threat vector, which kind of shows you heuristically or schematically how uncertainty changes as you move out in time. Next slide. So in terms of our mission, the CPC mission, we produce prediction and monitoring products on timescales from 2 weeks out to about a year. And again, emphasizing, given the inherently probabilistic nature, of these predictions on this timescale, stakeholders will decide whether or not they can use what we would call a subseasonal to seasonal, or S2S, or short-term climate prediction product based on two main factors. The first is their risk profile for whatever their decision is, and the second is the skill profile of that product. So for instance, we work with stakeholders who will use one product for certain decisions, but can't use another product. And that's the inherent reality of probabilistic prediction. And I think COVID has been an example with a lot of these models of probabilistic prediction, right? These predictions can give you some central value, which you can consider a mean, but then there are error bars. That's practical reality. Next slide. So one of our main foci is climate monitoring, including for precipitation and surface temperature, as well as for drought. My colleagues from the WFO were talking about the U.S. Drought Monitor. CPC provides, depending upon our staffing, two or three of the authors who on a weekly basis participate in this very collaborative process to synthesize a lot of different information to produce that U.S. Drought Monitor that's actually released every Thursday. Next slide. So CPC also has a robust climate diagnostic activity, which is designed to help us understand the current state of the climate, which helps us to inform future forecasts. The Climate Diagnostics Bulletin, which is available on our website, serves as a great source of information on the current state of the climate. Some of the diagnostic activities you may be familiar with include the Climate Diagnostic Bulletin, or CDB, as well as the ENSO diagnostic discussion. We also contribute to the Bulletin of the AMS Annual Climate Assessment Report, which is led by NCI and which you can get publicly. Next slide. So now getting into the prediction activities where we're going to spend most of our time. So CPC is the NOAA center responsible for prediction on timescales from 2 weeks to 1 year. We have a wide spectrum of products that many of you may be familiar with, including temperature and precipitation outlooks that occur on different timescales. I'll spend time talking today about the week 2. We also have week 3 and 4, monthly and seasonal. We also produce probabilistic hazards outlooks, and I'm going to focus my discussion today on these temperature and precipitation outlooks, again on the week 2 timescale, and then this probabilistic hazards outlook, because I think those may be of most interest to folks on the agricultural side if you're not familiar with the products. We also do provide ENSO predictions. ENSO is the largest single source of variability on these timescales. But again, even if you have a strong ENSO or El Nino or La Nina, you're not going to have perfect predictability. There are some places in the country, for instance, the Gulf Coast of the U.S., down into Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, that have an extremely strong precipitation signal. It would be great if we had such a strong signal over the rest of the country, but that's not the case. So next slide. Yeah, so this figure, which I should acknowledge I have repurposed from Dave Novak, who's the director of the Weather Prediction Center, who repurposed it from Russ Schneider, who's the director of the Storm Prediction Center, who got it from the original person who I always feel badly. I never get her name correct, but she was out at National Severe Storms Laboratory. So the x-axis represents time, or lead time, and then the y-axis represents uncertainty. So this is kind of this structure we would call the cone of uncertainty. So on the right side of the diagram, which is the shortest time lead, we have more accuracy, right? So you're getting closer, but not actually having a deterministic product, but you're getting closer to a deterministic product that has more certainty, although again, it certainly is an uncertain environment. So you're never getting 100% certainty, you know, more in the range of 20, 40, 60% of these extreme events. And then all the way on the left side are the seasonal outlooks. And so The cone spreads out in time because as you go out longer in time, because of these nonlinear interactions and different forcing functions that are not perfectly predicted, you get less certainty in the forecast. And those are reflected in the probabilities. And generally speaking, with a probabilistic forecast, the higher the probability, the more confident we are in that particular prediction. So, and again, emphasizing that a particular stakeholder, a farmer or a rancher or a water resource manager is going to determine if they can use a product based on their risk tolerance and the skill of the product. Next slide. So these are examples of our week 2 temperature and precipitation outlooks. They're given in what's called tercile probability classes. So probability of being above normal, near normal, or below normal. Before it was mentioned, the 30-year climatologies. And so we use the 30-year climatology. And so whether you're below, near, or above is based on the most recent 30 years, which, as was mentioned, is now been recently updated from 1991 to 2010. So we give the probability of each of these classes, although because the map is static and flat, when you look at the map, you only get the dominant category. So for instance, if we look there on the left side for central Indiana, you see this red shading, which is the probability of being above normal temperatures. And this is actually the forecast for June 9th to the 15th. And so you see that for central Indiana, there's a 59% probability of being above normal for temperature. Below normal is 8%, so much less, but near normal, there certainly is some potential that it will be near the climatological center as opposed to above or below. Conversely, if you look at the figure on the right-hand side, which is for the precipitation, you see that the near normal, below normal, and above normal for central Indiana are basically the same. And that's indicating that there's uncertainty in the forecast. And what ends up happening could be in either or any of those 3 categories. So what you could say is that for central Indiana, our forecasts for temperature are more confident, and we have higher predictability here than we would expect for precipitation. And that's commonly true. Temperature is an easier variable to predict than precipitation. And of course, I think one of the things we're very interested in is to try to make progress in improving precipitation forecast. I think folks in agriculture very much appreciate that. Even short time scale precipitation forecast, as my 2 colleagues from the WFO had mentioned, even short-term forecasts can have a lot of uncertainty. Next slide. So if you get onto our webpage, we have some interactive tools, and this particular interactive tool allows you to select a location. So that green balloon there that you can see is a location for this, what we would call a climate division, which is how our forecasts are produced on kind of a coarse-grained representation, and that's for central Indiana. And when you click on a particular location, it will give you what the current forecast is, but also gives you the climatological values of what is actually normal for that particular climate division at this time of year. And it does represent the complete probability space for these terciles in this pie chart. So you can see what the relative chances are of being above normal, near normal, or below normal. Next slide. So then the other product I think people may have interest in is the Week 2 U.S. Hazards Outlook. We issue that for potential for severe weather, or what we would call hazard or extreme high impact events. So the categories that we forecast for are much above or below normal temperature, much above normal precipitation, and high surface winds. Yeah, so I also have one of these cool things that one of the people who works for me has put on here that I'm not sophisticated enough to have done, but you can point at that and get to the link. There is, as you see on the left side, there is an interactive map where you can pick where you want to overlay different information. There's also, with all of our products, there's a forecast discussion, which describes how we arrive at the forecast, what the different tools are showing. There also is a customizable tool that you can use to look at probabilities of these extreme events based on what we would call an ensemble forecast system, which allows you to represent uncertainty. Next slide. So this is actually, and my colleagues had mentioned decision support services, which is the dominant service paradigm now in the Weather Service. And so this is a decision support services example of our products, this hazard product being used for heavy rain events for your region. And I should note that CPC is part of what's really truly a team effort in climate services. And it expands not just inside NOAA, but also to other federal agencies. So this is an example of where the Hazards Outlook was forecasting an enhanced probability of heavy rains in the fall of 2019, and that occurred against a baseline of having already had extensive flooding in the spring, and that flooding had severely negatively impacted planting, and then this, of course, coming at this time of year was going to negatively impact harvesting. So CPC Outlook was used as part of this decision support services briefing on the left, which was actually put together by my colleagues, including from NCEI, Doug Cluck, who's the Regional Climate Services Director for the Central Region, and Dennis Toddy from the USDA, who's the USDA Midwest Climate Hub Director, and then other people as well from the High Plains and Midwest Regional Climate Center. So again, just emphasizing this is a way that we are providing products and services that other partners in the decision support services or climate services venue are taking and integrating with other information and then presenting to partners. And so this is a common way that climate services are handled. And I would say, you know, I've had the pleasure of working with Doug and Dennis and the folks at the RCCs. You know, the Central Region, you guys are, you know, probably setting the highest bar with these. I think that it's a very well-oiled machine providing these sort of outlooks, and working also, of course, with the local WFOs who are critical to this process as well. And so it kind of shows different organizations providing information into the value chain. Next slide. Yeah, so just to emphasize, I do want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. CPC is a science-based service organization. We look forward to future dialogues to learn more about how we might be able to work to support your subseasonal to seasonal. And again, that's week 2 out to about a year. Climate services needs, either directly or working through climate services partners, such as the Regional Climate Service Director, the state climatologists, the WFOs. You know, we're a part of the story. We're not all of the story. And I think that's the reality in climate services, is that a lot of people make good contributions, and you know, I think it's going very well. And I do want to emphasize again, I think Central Region really sets a great example, and happy to be working with you. So that's it.
Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate it. Before we move on to the next session on monitoring, does anyone have any questions that they want to pose to our Weather Service partners? I know that there's been some chat in the chat, if you will, but if it'd be easier to unmute yourself and ask a question, would certainly like to give you this opportunity. All right, hearing nothing but crickets.
Hey, Beth, I don't have a question, just a comment for the presenters. I was trying to put links in the chat. I may or may not have gotten the ones that you think are most helpful or the extensive list. So if you are the facilitator or the presenter and you want to email me, I can make sure they get on the list, and I'll drop my email in the chat, or you're welcome to drop it in the chat yourself.
Good point, Melissa. And thanks to Melissa for keeping those links posting. Okay. So now we're going to move on to observations and monitoring, and I think I'm up next. So I wanted to share a little bit about the Purdue Mesonet. Again, for those that weren't on yesterday, a mesonet is really just a collection of weather observing stations around an area. They tend to be statewide, so there's quite a few state mesonets out there. There's certainly some more localized mesonets. For example, I know that there's one that just covers Clark County, I believe, up in the Chicago area of Illinois. There's also mesonets that expand multiple states. So it's not necessarily one or the other, but commonality, I think, among mesonets. When we say even mesonets, is they're typically managed, operated by climate scientists, by technicians that understand the technology. They tend to have very high quality sensors on them. So I know I'm always a backyard weather enthusiast, and I might get an automated weather station, pseudo-automated, say from the local Home Depot, that I can then register online and I can see cool graphs. But while those are great and entertaining, they are not as high quality as you would expect, even from federal observation networks that you might have at the airports. So it's really good to have more of these, because if we just relied on the data that are at the airports, there's not a good coverage of that. And I was glancing over in the chat, and there's conversations of, well, where's the nearest station to me? And is there one in every county? And the reality is there aren't. So we try to lean on volunteer networks, and the presentation after mine will talk about one of the volunteer networks of CocoRAS, but I think Mike or Sam might have mentioned the cooperative network that is just doing daily observations of temperature, snowfall, and precipitation. So another benefit to these mesonets is they do provide not just temperature and precipitation, but have other parameters as well. I think I might be getting ahead of myself here. So yeah, so we have solar radiation, humidity, winds, and another parameter that's pretty common with mesonets around the country that are not going to be as common, if you will, at the airport sites is soil temperature and moisture at multiple depths. So that means that if you see the map on the right, these are the locations of the 9 stations. They are all at Purdue agricultural centers, we call them PACs. And there's a agricultural center for research and education that's also near West Lafayette, Purdue. So it's not an even coverage. That's another problem. Is it would be great if we had a station in every county. I know some states are striving towards that or have achieved it. Oklahoma, New York, even Kentucky, I think is pretty close to having a station in every county. I would love to see that in Indiana, but there certainly are costs involved, not just the cost of the station investment, but there's costs to have personnel available who can continue to maintain that many stations. There's costs of running the database and the behind the scenes infrastructure computationally. Next is with the 30-minute data. So there are several volunteer networks out there where they do observations once a day, and that's wonderful. We have historical data going back into the 1800s because of that. So we certainly would never want to discount that, but it is nice to have this higher temporal resolution, if you will, of 30-minute data, because even folks like the Weather Service can use that information to be tracking what is happening on the ground. Website to access the data. So all the data from the Purdue Mesonet is available freely to anybody who wants it from the website. And I think I might have the links in future slides. And they also have dashboard things. Another thing that comes with mesonets that's really critical is a level of quality assurance and quality control, or QA/QC. When folks use, say, private apps, weather apps on their phones, or if they are investing in ag tools online, there's certainly benefits because they promote field level accuracy, but there's a lot of interpolation going on with that too. And I think that they tend to be pulling in data from these Home Depot stations. I mean, if you've ever bought one of those and then signed up on WeatherBug or something, Like again, they could be very high quality data, but they also may not be. And if there isn't a quality assurance, quality control process in place, it's one of those garbage in, garbage out of, yes, you're pulling data from this close weather station, but is it being quality controlled? When was the last time they calibrated their wind sensors and so forth? And then also with the Purdue Mesonet, we are in the process of building value-added tools off of the data. There was quite a bit of discussion in the chat yesterday about, does Indiana have value-added tools such as pest and disease management that is based on these station data? And we don't at the moment. It is on the list, and because it was brought up yesterday, it will be bumped up in priority. But we do already have potential evapotranspiration monitoring or reference ET monitoring. That tool is available on the website, and we are really close. I'm hoping within a week to a couple weeks of having an inversion monitoring tool based on these data sites. So the Purdue Mesonet actually started, I believe, in the early 2000s. It might even have data going back into the late 1990s. And some of the problems that we faced with it, I kind of adopted it or inherited it, if you will, when I came on board in 2019, was communication problems with the station. So they're automated sites. We don't have somebody going there every 30 minutes and figuring out what the data is. So somehow we need to have the sites register the data values coming in and then transmit that to the Purdue campus so that we can do something with it. So this seems to be an inherent problem where this site we just lost communications with, that site we lost communications. We also need to set up a database that can store, not only store the data, but make it very organized in a database format so that when people want the data, it can be pulled readily. Website for access. At the time, there really was not any coded QA/QC algorithms put in place, let alone flags that could go back and say, hey, this is a suspicious value. It could be real, or this is totally erroneous, such as a negative wind speed. It is just not possible. And there really weren't any value-added tools developed. So with inheriting this network, it's been a challenge for me and my colleague, Jonathan Weaver, to try and address all of these problems so that the Mesonet not only provides more value, but people will see the value of it and want to invest in more stations around the state. One of the early things we did is we set up an agreement with Campbell Scientific, which is one of the companies that produce the high quality instruments. And they have a dashboard. So I have the link down at the bottom of this screen that you could go and see the data, but you can just see from these icons or these dashboard things, you can quickly get a feel for, so what has happened over the past 24 hours, over the past 7 days, over the past 30 days, and they even do quick little squigglies after each of them. So if you don't want to look at all the numbers and you just want to get an idea, are things decreasing, increasing? For rainfall, you can see bar charts where you can see, oh, okay, so there was some rainfall at this station within the last 7 days or last 30 days. Internally, we are starting to build a website that will monitor the Mesonet. And one of the cool features of the State Climate Office's Mesonet monitoring website is this first landing map where you come in and you can see all the stations, where they're located, our code names for all of them. So remember I said they're almost all of them are at Purdue Ag Centers, which we call PACs. So that's why we have PPAC, NEPAC, DPAC, and so forth. But this one, I believe, is showing temperature at the time that I looked at this map. So you can quickly just look at the color shading and get a feel for where the temperature is cooler versus warmer. What are the actual values? There are pull down features on this site where maybe you don't want to look at air temperature. Maybe you want to look at soil temperature, 4-inch depth. Maybe you want to look at relative humidity. So you can quickly, with that pull down menu, change the parameter and then see the snapshot across the state. There's graphs that you can look at. So if you're more interested in the station closest to you, not what's going on everywhere else in the state, you can click on the graphs, and there is very user-friendly slider tools where you can slide, oh, I've just been interested in the last couple of days, or maybe I want to look at the full period of record, in which case that graph would be full of a lot of information. And then there's the data tables where users can go and say, I would just like to get precipitation data and humidity data from the start date to end date, download it. And it is, we hope, very user-friendly in how people can access that data. But certainly we want to hear from you. I mean, we have ideas for how this should look, but it's the end user that really we're trying to serve on this. So here's another example of that data table option, and you can see in the top right where you can choose the period that, oh no, I think this is the PET tool, my apologies. So this is where one can click on a station and they can figure out what their start date is to the current date. And they can scroll through this list and see what is the PET on that day. So these are daily derived values, what has been accumulating from that start date through, how much precipitation, accumulated precipitation, and the whole water balance idea. So this is one of those first value-added tools that we created off of the Mesonet data. And again, it was driven by the end users. People in the northern part of the state, particularly the northeastern part of the state, said, you know, we're doing a lot of irrigation up here, and we don't even have a good idea of how much water we should be putting on the fields. We need some sort of data that we can say, well, how much has fallen or not fallen or evaporated, so that we know we only need to add an inch from the irrigation systems. And then another tool that we hope to add in is inversion monitoring. I think this came up in a previous presentation yesterday. This is Michigan, obviously, it's not Indiana, but one of the ideas for this tool is people can go to the page right away, and with this color coding and arrows, they can see, is there a low-level inversion currently in place or not? And that is important for the chemical drift issues for agriculture. And if they don't want to spray when there is an inversion, so they're going to have to wait until they get the green light, if you will. And I believe that we want to make these tools very mobile friendly so that people can have their smartphones, be looking at this. It can be updating, like I said, every 30 minutes, and they can see, okay, it's finally gone green. Now we can go out and spray. And hopefully that will minimize some of those negative impacts from off-target drift scenarios, issues. We're also in the process this month of installing soil moisture sensors. So prior to this month, we've just had soil temperature at the 4-inch depth, but we're going to be installing now soil moisture and temperature sensors at 4 depths. I believe it's 2 inches, 4 inches, 10 inches, and 20 inches at all the 9 locations. I'm showing this map because Molly brought this up, and I think another talk brought it up, that there is a big national effort to improve soil moisture monitoring. From my point of view, as somebody who's always going for grant dollars, that because there's such a strong national push, I wanted to have soil moisture monitoring in place in the state so that we can be eligible for this federal funds to continue to support that effort. You can see how states such as Nebraska and Oklahoma, even Illinois and Chicago, they have a good network with their Mesonet. Indiana currently does not. So if we can get 9 more points on the state where we're measuring soil moisture, and particularly at the depths that they're interested in, I think this will, if you will, put Indiana on the map with regards to soil moisture monitoring. So I kind of went through the needs issue. What we realized a couple of years ago coming on board is we really do need to have an automated QA/QC system, but also manuals. So about 2 to 3 times a week, I will go and look at all the data and just see, are there any spikes that shouldn't be there that maybe an automated system wouldn't have? We could have auto alerts come by, particularly for us more internally, so that we're not waiting to just randomly fall upon it. We're getting an alert right away that says, hey, we think there's a problem with this sensor. We have hired a part-time Mesonet technician who can go around to all of the sites, and that's important because we are lacking manpower in all of this, but there is training involved. What are the seasonal issues you got to look at for these stations? What sort of data monitoring should we be doing? What troubleshooting? We have online metadata tracking. There really, like I said earlier, was no way if somebody downloaded the data, and even at this point, they're just going to get the data. What they don't know is this data any good? Because no one has actually flagged the data to say, oh, well, we just, we knew there was no rain on this day, but there was rain in the data. We're just going to replace it all with zeros. Well, climatologists don't ever want to lose original data. We would rather flag that data and say, this was erroneous data that we did change, but this is the actual data. And then, of course, we want to have more and more value-added tools. And how we prioritize the next value-added tool will come from people like you, who will sit there and say, I really need a pest monitoring degree day tool out there. Otherwise, you're going to leave it up to us, and we're just going to come up with whatever we think is fun, which may not be the most beneficial to you. So I'm going to end there with my contact information. I mentioned Jonathan Weimer because he really is the guy that does the database and has developed the QA/QC routines and is going to be developing the value-added tools. So, and he's very comfortable getting emails from everyone. So if you want to just bypass me, because really if you email me, I'm just going to forward it on to him. Try and facilitate that. But otherwise, we're really excited to hear what sort of tools does the agricultural community want. And like I said, we hope to continue to add more and more stations as soon as we have funding available. So I will end there. I don't know if there are any questions in the box, but I will switch over to the other presentation. If somebody does want to ask me a question, I can try and answer it while I'm switching.
Beth, I think you answered my question there, which was if we have suggestions for the Mesonet value-added products now or in the future, what is the best way to get you those requests? Mm-hmm. So it sounds like just a direct email to you or to Jonathan would be preferred.
Yes. Because really we are driven by comments. So in a summit like this, we'll take note of what were the needs that people said. And if people listed certain needs, I will even report that back to NCEI and say, hey, we can only do so much with our Mesonet. Is there any way that even the National Weather Service could try and fulfill that need somehow? I know they have gridded products from the National Weather Service, and maybe it's something that they haven't even thought of. So this is where the partnerships that we have both across the state and at the federal level is so critical in these summits, because then all of the partners can hear what the needs are, and then we can figure out how best to serve it. But really reaching out to me or anyone that has been on this summit, I think we can all kind of track down and say, how can we solve this problem as quickly and efficiently as possible? All right, I'll try to watch chat, but unfortunately I'm also switching the slides for Sam on this next presentation, so I may not be able to respond to your chat right away. Sam, if you want to start now.
All right, and thank you for doing the slides for us. We appreciate that. And if I had known we had so many Star Trek fans, boy, I would have loaded up a lot of Star Trek memes into this presentation. Really, I'll do my Kirk imitation. Sorry. Okay. Had to get that in.
Love it.
All right. So we're going to talk about Coco Roz now rather than Star Trek. And so I'm going to do most of this presentation, but Mike, jump in if I forget something or miss something. And I wanted to point out Andrew White, who is our Coco Roz program leader for the National Weather Service. And he really has all the answers to this program and has been doing a fantastic job for the state on the Weather Service side. So I want to give a shout out to him. So we can go on to the next slide, please. And I also want to give a shout out to Beth. Beth, this is the best picture I could find of you at an outreach booth here. But your state climate office has done just a fantastic job with promoting Coco Roz, and really we had kind of fallen into a stagnant pattern with the program, and she's really helped to get this back on track and moving forward and doing a fantastic job. So just want to recognize State Climate Office and also Hans for all the work he does on it, and Austin Pearson, and really all of the extension agents across the state that have helped promote CocoRaHS. And I keep calling it CocoRaHS. I didn't really explain what it is. I apologize. So it stands for the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. And this is a really cool program I've been involved with since it started in Indiana back, I believe, in 2008. And I was a longtime observer in Elkhart County before I moved down here to the central part of the state. The information from this is really valuable. And when we started this program, we really thought the ag partners across the state would jump in and just, you know, really help take this off. And we really haven't seen that over the years. And we think it's because it's not an automated system. You're going to see this as manual observations being taken every morning by volunteers. And there's some reasons for that I will get into, but we really want to see this program expand across the state, as I'll show you why here in a shortly. But so please, as we go on here, if you think your organization or might be able to help promote this, we go out and we do training, we do talks on CocoRaHS. We'd really love to hear from you and expand this program across the state even more than it already is. All right, next slide, please. So as I said, this is a grassroots effort. It started back in 1998 in Colorado when some heavy rain fell in the mountains, and nobody knew how much rain fell, but massive flooding occurred below the mountains in Boulder, Colorado. So the state climatologists began handing out rain gauges, and then this program has just expanded over the years. So there's over 20,000 active volunteers now across the United States. We even have observers in the provinces across Canada, in the territories of the United States, and even in the Bahamas. So it's really taken off. It's quality observations by trained observers. That's what makes this unique. It's a citizen science-based program, but we train those people to take these quality measurements. So we've talked a little bit about the National Weather Service co-op program, and you might be asking, so what's the difference? Well, the co-op program has limited funding. There's no secret about that. We really only have about one per county, and many counties now, we don't even have that, trying to find people to maintain or do the observations. It's just not like it used to be. People want something less strict, a little bit more, where if they take a vacation, they don't have to worry about observations. So CocoRaHS is sort of filling in the gaps between our cooperative weather program. And we have some observers, like I said, that have been part of this program since 1998 and have some high quality data. Next slide, please. So are the observations really important? Well, here's a slide that shows who's using the data, and you can read through that list and see quite a bit of variety in the users. Even NASA was actually participating in CocoRaHS years ago when the space shuttle program was ongoing. We used to have a slide that showed the nose cone of the space shuttle that got hit by a hailstorm, and NASA was actually measuring the hailstones for CocoRaHS when that happened. So I did add down at the bottom, CocoRaHS is now a STEM activity for 4-H. It's actually in the 4-H project book, and we've added climate to the 4-H project book as well. So it's part of the more advanced stages of the weather projects associated with 4-H. So for those of you in the ag, if you want to promote CocoRaHS within the 4-H program, that would be even fantastic as well, to get our young people involved in taking observations and understanding the importance in the program as well. Okay, next slide. So the measurements are taken daily, usually between 5 and 10 a.m. Again, we give some pretty good leeway there for people based on their schedules. When I worked rotating shifts, I might take my observations at 6 in the morning when I was on day shift, or I might take them at 7:30 when I got home from a midnight shift. But you're able to record that day's observation. And as long as we get everybody in sort of this 5-hour window, we can compare apples to apples, so to speak. And everybody also uses the same equipment, the same rain gauge. You can see down there in the bottom right, it's not your typical rain gauge you're going to buy at the hardware store. These are gauges that cost about $30 to $35. We've got some vendors on the CocoRaHS website where you can buy them from. They hold up to 11 inches. They are high quality, very sturdy rain gauges. I had mine for 10 years, and the only thing that went wrong with it is it starts to get cloudy. That plastic gets cloudy over time, and eventually I did have to replace it. But if you take care of them, they're going to last, and they're going to give you very accurate results for your location compared to what you might buy in the hardware store with those rain gauges. We also, a lot of our observers take snowfall measurements. So you can see down there in the bottom left, we go over training with how to have a snowboard, how to take as accurate as you can be, snowfall measurements. It's not just going out, sticking a ruler down to the ground and reading the number off of it. So that's part of the training and why we have such good observations from our volunteers. All right, next slide, please. So we have a couple different ways you can enter measurements when you go out. It used to be you had to go out, take the measurement, come back in, get on your computer and put it into the little form you see on the right-hand side. But now there is a really cool app both for Apple and Android phones, and you can just take your phone right out to the gauge, read the value, put it into your phone, dump the rain gauge, and you're done. It's just that easy and that simple. And then all that data gets sent to a website that I'm going to show you here in just a minute. And I just want to stress, whether you participate as a volunteer in this program or not, the data from the network is freely available on the CoCoRaHS website, link down there at the bottom, cocorahs.org. You can look at this data from anywhere in the United States. You can compare stations. You can see what it's doing in your county if you have observers. And you can track this data without participating, but we really do want you involved as an observer. If you feel that this data is important, then we'd like to see you actually helping us by taking the observations. Next slide. So here is that website, and this was from last week. You can see there were 11,000 reports on this particular day when I captured this. And every site you see there with a colored dot, that is a site across the United States that reported precipitation. You'll also see some just blank or white circles on the map. Those are reports of zero precipitation. Great discussion earlier about bad data versus no data. We want our observers reporting every day whether it rains or snows or not. And that way, when we go back and do research, we can see, there's no doubt if there's a zero reported, that station actually took the measurement and had zero precipitation. We might have a day where there's a few spotty showers or thunderstorms, and we have some people that reported, others reported zero, and then other stations didn't report at all. Well, did those stations not report, just not report, or did they have no precipitation? It creates doubt. So we really encourage every day to submit a report, whether you had rain or snow or not. All right, next slide, please. So you can zoom down on that map. This is a new interface they just implemented over the last 6 months. And you can just use your mouse and your scroll button and just zoom right in. So here I zoomed into the state, and you can see the blue dots correspond there anywhere from 1/100 of an inch up to about 1/2 inch across the state. But you see some yellows and reds that really stick out, and you can zoom in all the way into that county level. And once you get in that level, then the actual values pop up on the map. So you can really start to see, especially with thunderstorms just like today, they're out here, they're around, but not everybody's getting hit. And you can see how the variability occurs just across one county, like it happened here in Allen County back on this particular day. All right, next slide. I also wanted to point out on that same day, here's Tippecanoe County, and we have a few observations in the north, but not any in the south. And then west of Tippy, it's a lot of farmland. Not a lot of people out in Benton, Warren, and Fountain counties, but we do have a lot of farms out that way. And if we could really start populating this map with some of our farmers out there, we could really learn a lot, and that really helps us study precipitation trends and get a better handle on what's going on, not only climatologically, but even in the short term when it comes to potential flood warnings. We'll have a better idea of who's seen the rain, where the soil is saturated, where it's dry. And then that data is also fed into our drought monitoring and the state drought team. We look at these CoCoRaHS observations on a weekly basis to see who's hit the rain and who's been missed. Okay, next slide. So here's a couple images. On the left is our active stations across the state. So you can see it's really heavily impacted around major cities, big cities, and it's in the rural communities where we really need to know more what's going on precipitation wise, and that's why we're here talking to you about this. We've had a few new observers sign up across the rural parts, but again, on the right-hand side, you can see it is really focused towards the bigger city areas where we have more population of citizens. And I also want to point out, this is a great program. We have people of all ages participating. We have school-age children. We have some schools involved. We have a lot of senior citizens that just do this as an activity in their retirement. And then we have working people who just take it every morning before they go off to work. So we can accommodate just about anybody for this program. So we average about 430 reports a day with 566 active observers. That's a pretty good ratio there of about 65%. All right, next slide, please. So you can go on to the next slide here. I want to show how CoCoRaHS was important in a couple big events. And everybody remembers the drought of 2012. What a summer that was. And this particular station up in Kosciuszko County just happens to be the National Weather Service, but that office has a CoCoRaHS gauge as well as an evapotranspiration gauge. We also have that down here at the Indianapolis office. And that allows us to track water balance across the state at certain sites. So we do have a few other sites, CoCoRaHS, that have evapotranspiration gauges. Those evapotranspiration gauges are a little bit more expensive. They run a few $100s, but they're excellent tools and instruments that record this evaporation in the warm season. So here for the drought of 2012, you can see we dropped down between early June and mid-July. We had a water deficit of almost 8 inches there, and that basically was maintained. We had a few rain events, but not enough to make up that deficit. So we were able to track this all the way out through October, where we had ended the growing season really with 8-inch deficit for that season. Just unbelievable. Parts of lakes were drying up, ponds were dried up, and I know the ag industry was hit hard by this event. Okay, next slide. Again, that data is just fed into that National Drought Monitor. So this was from July 31st during that drought year. And CoCoRaHS was just invaluable in allowing us to pinpoint the parts of the state that were hit hardest. And you can see there in that highest level of drought across the southwest part of the state, which ironically is the parts of the state that is seeing the most increase in rainfall. And you're like, wait a minute, how's that happen? Well, with increased rainfall events, it's more extreme with more rain at once and then greater number of dry days in between events. So this is another signal of climate change, is back and forth between these extreme events. So next slide, please. So that fast forwards us to 3 years from 2012 drought to the Great Flood of 2015. Again, here's that water balance chart. And in this particular summer, we got up by September to almost 13 inches on the plus side for the water balance. And again, we can only do this by measuring these stations with CoCoRaHS and tracking these events. So just a drastic change in 3 years. So we go from not enough water and all the irrigation going on to too much water, can't get in the fields, and all kinds of problems that was generated from that. Next slide, please. So here is some of that data from the CoCoRaHS website that I talked about. These were some stations just from June alone. Rensselaer up there, CoCoRaHS station, 18 inches of rain in the month of June 2015. Just unbelievable. So you can sort this data on the website by county, by station, by amounts, and you can download it easily as well for your local information and records as you need it. All right, next slide. I'll try and wrap it up here real quick. And I love to show this picture from the flood of 2015, Mississinawa River reservoir. This is normal summer pool, but in the summer of 2015, next slide, that reservoir reached capacity. That's the same bridge, and just an incredible amount of water was being stored in that particular summer. Yeah, back and forth there, pretty just dramatic and amazing. So thanks to CocoRa's, we were able to track this, get flood warnings out when we had thunderstorms. We knew where the areas were wet and where some areas that could hold rain, and that's how it benefited us at the Weather Service. All right, next slide. I think, oh yeah, had to give a plug in here again for the State Climate Office putting out the Hoosier Observer newsletter. This goes out monthly to all of our observers. Just a kind of a wrap up and summary of what's been going on and some helpful tips for our observers. This is a case where we're protecting the rain gauge from birds sitting on top and clogging the rain gauge. So just an added benefit of participating in the program. And yeah, I'll just end on this slide since we're a little behind here, but these are our goals for 2021, and we really need your help for getting our number of reports up, filling in those gaps. And again, if it's not you, if it's your organization, I know soil and water conservation people are on here. I've worked with some of your county offices in the past to do training for rural areas, and we'd love to hear from you, love to set up some training. And right now, it'll still be virtual, but in the future, we can actually get out to your county and do some in-person talks to train and promote CocoRa. So with that, I'll end it, and I appreciate it. You can go on the website and get signed up today. If you have any questions, Dr. Beth Hall there or Andrew White would be happy to answer them for you. So thank you very much.
Sam, did you want to say a few words? You said, we really do hope that there's an observation submitted every day, but obviously people want to take a day off, a vacation. So can you make a comment on multi-day reports and even the seasonal observers that might be snowbirds?
Yeah, we don't let people take days off. That's not allowed. No, just joking. That's part of this. The beauty of this program is the flexibility, and we have many people. We have snowbirds that go to Florida for the winter, and they just stop observing for the 5 or 6 months, come back and pick back up where they left off. The multi-day reports is an option. If you miss a day or 2 days, or maybe even a week or two while you're on vacation, you can come back, read what's in your rain gauge, and then there's a separate report on the website called a multi-day report, and you just enter the total amount that's in your gauge in that report, and then you go back to reporting day by day as you did before you went on vacation. And again, one day it could be you take the observation at 6 a.m., the next day at 8 a.m. That's fine. You just change the reporting time each day to match the closest time when you read that gauge or take your snowfall measurement. So flexibility is built in. We want to get that data when we can get it. And if you can report every day, fantastic. But we understand life gets in the way of being a volunteer sometimes.
All right, great. Thanks, Sam. Any other questions for Sam or me? I haven't been able to keep up with the chat. Earl has a nice comment. I always, there could be like just friendly competitions with your neighbor, of who has the most consistent reports, but also, who got the most rain? I got this much, and so forth. So it is a fun thing to do, volunteer, and you are contributing to the science and data across the state. So we're slightly behind, but I'm not freaking out over that. I'm being chill with the whole thing, but I think we all still need a break. So I propose that we take, let's see, it's 9:57 on my computer. Let's come back at 10 after 10, so 10:10. And when we do, we will hear from the folks from the ag industry on how they're using data and how data could be improved, resources could be improved. So come on back at 10:10 and we'll see you then. All right, welcome back everyone. Hopefully the break was productive and relaxing for you. Got maybe a bite to eat or could just step away from the computer for a few minutes, but we're gonna jump into the next session that we really hope is going to be an open discussion. We want to hear from many of you, but I have specifically invited 3 individuals to seed the conversation, pun intended, seed the conversation of where is agriculture in Indiana going, and climate together. What are the biggest climate concerns? We did that Mentimeter question yesterday. And so they are going to be representing essentially 3 different aspects of agriculture in the state. I asked them to, let's see, what the greatest climate concerns are from their perspective, what climate decision support resources are great that you really like and you use out there, because maybe that can inspire other people to check them out, but also where are climate decision support resources lacking these days that is making it harder to stay productive and increase the yields. And let's see, what do you think the future of climate services for agriculture in Indiana will look like? So I've asked them they can either do a presentation or just talk about their thoughts on the whole thing. And we'll start with Bob. I'll ask them to introduce yourself, kind of say who you are, what role you have, and then just start the conversation. And then I'm asking everyone else, as you're listening to them, maybe make notes and how would you respond? How would you answer the questions? So Bob, we'll start with you.
All right. Can you hear me okay, Beth?
I can.
All right. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I have to admit, my mind's not quite been on this week. I've got a son getting married tomorrow. Our air conditioner unit went out last week, and those guys are here today putting in the new one. So you may hear some pounding going on in the background. And anyway, it's been a bit of a hectic week. So I apologize if I don't have my usual 3-hour presentation, but Beth told me I only had 5 or 10 minutes anyway. So I'm an extension specialist and professor at Purdue in agronomy. And I've been at this for nearly 40 years. My focus has been on corn. And so just a few comments, I guess, that come to mind as I've thought about the task that Beth asked us to do. And, and I often think of this one quote that's sometimes attributed to Mark Twain, but I don't think anyone knows where it came from, frankly, but it's the sort of famous quote that says, "Climate is what you expect, weather is what you get." And I do think about that as an agronomist a lot because, while climate change and global warming, is of great interest to everybody, most farmers make decisions based on current weather events or forecast over a much shorter time frame than when we talk about climate per se. So, it's really the day-to-day, the week-to-week weather events that have the greatest impact on the decisions that farmers make, and frankly, as us agronomic researchers, the decisions we make. And so it's really the recent weather events, especially damaging ones, plus the prospects given to us by short-term weather forecasts and primarily the 6 to 10 or 8 to 14 day forecasts. Those kind of weather events and forecasts are what really drive farmers' decisions and frankly does impact a lot of what we do as agronomic researchers around the state too. So, and so because of that, Beth and her predecessors have heard us complain many times before that if we could improve the accuracy of short-term weather forecasting and to a more limited degree, perhaps more seasonal forecasting, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month kind of forecasting, I believe from a farmer's perspective, that would have the greatest impact on their ability to make better decisions. Yes, I am curious about what's going to happen over the next 10, 15, 20 years as this climate continues to change, and I do worry about it. But, as a farmer or as a researcher, my focus is tomorrow. as a researcher, am I going to be able to go to the southeast farm and collect data, or should I instead go to the northeast farm? And I'm flying a lot of drones these days, and so now I really worry about flight conditions as I'm preparing on where I'm going, and in particular, I need accurate forecasts on wind conditions and also solar conditions, because when you're flying a drone and using it to collect data, you either need almost totally sunny days or totally cloudy days, and the in-betweens just kill you. And of course, you need wind, and especially gusts that are moderate, I'll say, something less than 20-mile-an-hour gusts or 25-mile-an-hour gusts. And, so when I'm planning to make a 3-hour drive somewhere to fly some of our research fields, I really need some accurate weather forecasting to tell me all of those kinds of things. And farmers are the same way. And from a farmer's perspective, if you go back, we're just finishing up planting season, and if I knew with certainty that the 6 to 10 day forecast was that perhaps, let's say, the forecast is dry and sunny, if I had absolute confidence that was accurate, and today the fields are marginal to be in, they're just a little too wet, and I'm going to create compaction if I get in there today. If I knew with confidence that the 6 to 10 day forecast of dry and sunny was accurate, I'd be more willing to delay a day or two to get out in the field and maybe avoid creating compaction. But if I don't have that confidence, and if perhaps my gut says, oh, I just can't afford another rain because it'll delay me even further, then I'm going to pull the trigger and go out with my tillage equipment, with my planting equipment. I'm going to create compaction like crazy, but I'm going to take that risk because of the uncertainty of the forecast. Because if I wait and, oh my gosh, I wait 2 days and suddenly I do get a rain, and now I'm out for a week, I'm in big trouble. Another example, there's a recent news article, University of Minnesota, just the other day, on the benefits of split application of nitrogen. And I'll read you, this is verbatim out of this article. They say, unfortunately, the accuracy of season-long weather forecasting is still low, no offense, and limits our ability to preemptively adjust management decisions to consistently maximize input efficiency in response to weather conditions. And so this means that the management decisions often have to be made based on management decisions, meaning, let's say, our recommendations for how to manage nitrogen, are often made on the basis of research trials from past years and previous experience of what may happen, instead of accurately basing it on the weather conditions that are going to come. So again, the short-term weather forecasting, as well as the actual current conditions, obviously play a major impact on farmers' decisions and also us as agronomic researchers. And I'd have to say, Beth, that and I've thought this for years, so it's not your fault, is where I'm headed, Beth. Generally speaking, I don't think most farmers are fully aware of the range of products available from the National Weather Service, from the Midwest Regional Climate Center, from your state climate office. I honestly don't think they are fully aware of everything that's out there. And frankly, whenever you do a biweekly update with our educators that we do, and you throw up all these charts and stuff that you're getting from the Regional Climate Center or your own office, I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot of stuff there. And I don't think a lot of our growers fully are aware of that. So now we're talking visibility and name recognition and stuff on that. And I think it's also partly due to the proliferation of subscription-based commercial products that a lot of the ag industry has made available to their clientele, including climate and Agrible among the few subscription-based tools. But frankly, I think just the availability of the simpler AccuWeather type resources that are everybody and his brother has 14 weather apps on their phone, right? And because they're free. And I'll be the first to admit that, when I'm trying to make a decision on where I can go to collect data this week, I look at the National Weather Service forecast, I look at AccuWeather, I look at Dark Sky, I look at WeatherBug and a few others, and I try to look for commonality among those forecasts just to feel comfortable in where I go. Maybe that's just me, and I'm being too harsh on the public sector, and so in terms of using weather data, I can break it up into extension and research. As an extension specialist. So, as an extension crop specialist, I use weather data frequently to document the weather phenomenon, the weather events that have hit around the state, especially damaging weather events, because as an extension specialist, part of my role is to be sort of reactive as to, the big hailstorm that hit 2 counties and putting out articles on corn recovery from hail damage. But it's also preemptively, and again, someone mentioned the 2012 drought, and certainly that year we were heavily reliant on current weather data as well as the forecast. And as extension specialists, we were trying to look ahead and saying, well, if the drought continues, if the severity continues, here's what we think is going to happen in terms of crop growth and development and yield. And so we're heavily reliant on the current data that's available from all of these sources, as well as the forecast. So we're talking things. The serious things we worry about in crops are killing frosts and freezes, and stressfully cold temps, stressfully hot temps, damaging rainfall events, meaning too much or too little. I mean, it's sort of like Goldilocks, right? I mean, we're it's a little bit too much, a little bit too less. Oh, this is just right. And we're always, having to deal with so many things that influences crop production every year. And so we're extremely reliant on getting hold of this kind of data. And then, and so I use it a lot in terms of the extension news articles I write during the summer, but also during the winter in my extension programming. I use weather data a lot as I summarize what happened in the past year and try to relate it to what happened to the crops. And so again, I am always using those weather summaries from all sorts of sources, probably especially the Midwest Regional Climate Center, where I use a lot of it. Yeah. And so from a research perspective, obviously, sort of like farmers, we also worry about the impact of weather on our field trials around the state. So we routinely document the weather data that might influence our research trials around the state. And of course, most of our graduate student theses that are involving field research trials, it's almost like it's a requirement that they have a section in their thesis that's weather summary for all the locations of their trial. And so we are always going back to the weather records from the individual PACs or the Purdue Ag Centers, as Beth mentioned, or other sources. I've already mentioned that, current conditions as well as forecasts help us plan our travel around the state, because some of us use many of these outlying Purdue Ag Centers, and some of them are indeed 2 to 3 hours away. And we just can't afford to send a crew out 3 hours and arrive, and suddenly, halfway through the day, it starts pouring on us and we got to leave. And so, if it's raining down at the southeast farm, or it's forecast to rain, but it's not going to do it at the northeast farm, then we're going to change our plans and head up to the northeast farm. So on a sort of a day-to-day decision basis in research, when we're spread out around the state like we are with all of these trials, it's extremely important for us to know the current conditions and the 24-hour, 48-hour forecast. And I've already mentioned the impacts on UAV flights, because that frankly has heightened the importance of weather conditions, because those have such an impact on whether we can conduct good flight missions or not with our drones and UAVs. And then one last little thing is, especially with corn that is so heavily reliant on heat in terms of how fast it develops, we are always paying attention to growing degree days. And so it helps us target when we do certain things. And so this year, for example, in some of our sulfur fertilizer trials, we're applying the treatments with the side-dress nitrogen. Our goal is to try and apply that nitrogen at all of our locations around the V3 to V4 leaf stage. Well, we can rely on the people on the ground at the outlying centers to tell us what growth stage it is, but frankly, I like to be able to predict it sitting at my desk, and so that I can plan my schedule for the week. That, okay, it looks like it's CPAC, it's only going to be V2 based on the weather data from Beth's office or other sources, or way up in the north, it's maybe it's farther along, etc. So being able to access this data, especially current data, almost live data, is really important for us for just simple things like predicting crop growth stage. And because sometimes we're going to do foliar fungicide applications at silking. Well, we want to be pretty sure, which week we're going to hit silking and all this. So again, as a researcher, an agronomic researcher, clearly weather information, weather forecasting, accurate data is important for what we do, but in very similar ways, it's also important to our farming clientele. And again, as an extension specialist farming clientele are basically my main clientele. As I'm doing newsletter articles and trying to provide useful agronomic information to our growers, quite often it does include weather events and or weather forecasts to help me as an extension specialist do a better job of talking about the possible impacts or possible conditions for the crops around the state. So Beth, that was maybe longer than you wanted, but that's what I have to say, and I'll mute now and wait for questions or wait for others. So,
thanks, Bob. I think it was great, and I was taking lots of notes on what you were saying, and even perhaps future questions when we get through all the speakers.
And Jonathan can attest. I have bugged him several times this spring already with ideas for how to tweak what you have available on your website. So I'm glad he's been receptive.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that from you, Bob, too. So hopefully that's testament to others, that it's like, if you want something tweaked on our tools, just email out. And Jonathan is really good at trying to address that as soon as he can. All right, let's move on to Melanie, who, if you can introduce yourself and what you do and all the climate relationships you have.
Wonderful. Thanks, Beth. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to participate in the panel today. I didn't have a presentation per se, because this kind of came through over the weekend, but we're honored to have the opportunity to share our farm's vision and quest for climatic information to support our operations and research. And so we're hoping that in communicating with you that we can begin to get some kind of collaboration or mutual support. I've known you now for about 2 years. I've enjoyed working with you, and excited about all the move from NRCC over to Purdue. That's really nice. I've enjoyed that application, as well as our discussions about the Messinet. And as far as who I am a Hoosier native. I am a Purdue alumna. And I'm the general manager for Shawnee Hills Farm in the affiliated Permaculture Research Station. So that is something that's emerged. We moved back here from Texas just a few, maybe a little over 2 years ago. I am a well-trained natural scientist with multiple degrees in geology and geophysics and a minor in agronomy. I am a Hoosier native. I've about a 7th generation, so my family has been in Indiana since the beginning. But this is my second career as a horticulturalist, and I had 20 years as an international frontier explorer and a petroleum geoscientist. I've been all over the world. I've made discoveries in some of the most difficult remote environments, a very strong background in GIS, remote sensing, and data analysis at all scales. So I really, really love data. So when we get to talk about climate data and you show me the maps, I mean, Commander and Data and I could be good buddies. So I really appreciated your mem in your presentation. But in any case, after a long career in oil and gas, I've returned home. I had a second home that has now become my passion and workplace, which is great. My commute now to my workplace is about 2 minutes from my house to my orchard. So I've enjoyed that change in my lifestyle, but very much passionate and proactive at all that I do here at Shawnee Hills Farm. And I say I've known you for past 2 years, but I'm really enjoying the opportunity to meet with many of the other collaborating organizations that I'm sure that will have additional discussions with point forward. So then now that I've returned home to establish this farm and research station that's dedicated to the elucidation of horticultural frontiers. So we're changing gears a little bit in my life. And so that's kind of who I am. So as I mentioned, my background is very quantitative, and I maintain ability and passion for integrating data at multiple scales and dimensions to solve problems like growing orchards more sustainably, for example. So about the farm itself, Shawnee Hills Farm, it was established January 1st of 2019. So we're a little over 2 years old now. And we're here in Greene County in the scenic rolling hills of southern Indiana, which is a half-hour southwest of Bloomington. The estate is 165 acres, and we have 90 acres of timber where we've initiated several agroforestry initiatives. We also have 40 acres of hayland, 90 acres of pasture raising cattle with an emerging silvopasture component. That's where you graze in and among trees. And so we've been building some groves in our pastures that our cows are not able to enjoy yet, but they will. I also have a half-acre nursery that's focused on herbs and garden starts. That also requires some climatic data, but not nearly so much as the orchard itself, which has been our principal interest and activity these past several years. Currently it's a 2-acre, but we have plenty of room for expansion on our estate. It's a diverse polyculture orchard that we planted last year in kind of an interesting way that I won't go into, but in any case, we have plenty of room to grow. And so this past, this year has especially been significant as we begin our foundational research, which requires a lot of data. So we started production this year. The planting was last year for the most part, but we started production this year from an outrageously diverse polyculture orchard. We have 169 trees, 218 shrubs, and 20 vines, representing 110 species and 342 cultivars. Now, most orchards in Indiana that I'm aware of are dominantly apple monoculture orchards, and they operate under a different paradigm than we do. We are diverse, we are deliberately diverse, and we do so because that enables us to hedge our risk as well as expand our season to maximize our usage of available labor and other resources. So it's a different paradigm than your typical monoculture farm, but it's very data intensive. And so I also noted that we planted largely disease-resistant varieties based on exhaustive cultivar research and cross-integration into various data matrices. So again, there's a very strong data component to this, that we are harnessing the power of data to optimize and improve our, not only our operations and yields, but also our research. So we have a very strong research component. I'm a scientist. I love this. This is what I would do. This is what I do for fun. So, so there's that side of it as well. We are a sustainable biorational producer, which means that we are interested in applying agents and methods that are not only effective in mitigating pests or diseases, but also impactful in managing overall materials and labor economics of, but also minimizing ecologic impacts. So we were neither on the organic end nor the conventional end. This doesn't apply in endorsement of listed organic agents, many of which we find ineffective and or ecologically unsustainable, believe it or not. And in fact, we consider the use of conventional agents that are targeted towards specific pests and pathogens as possibly a better option than organic agents. Unfortunately, the ecologic impacts of the conventional agents are elusive at present. And so as a data-driven decision maker, the data that we need commonly are not available at this stage. But we see that adversity as the basis for our opportunity, and the absence of such information as a basis for our path forward and passion. And I think to some degree, you and I, Beth, would agree that that adversity sometimes is a good opportunity. And I know you've made a lot of advances within your office, and I greatly appreciate all of your efforts so far. So let's see in my notes then. So our approach to the use of data at our farm, the climatic data, is quantitative. We desire to manage our operations and economy through integrated pest and disease management. I call it quantitative orchard management. I have a different term because it doesn't necessarily line exactly one-to-one with the common definitions of integrated pest management. So that is, we intend in the future to be able to integrate climate data to underlay and justify
Did we
every
get with the
action in
paint?
the orchard. I guess we got a mute situation there. Okay, to optimize our multivariate economy. Now we can't do that. We can't use the data, one, because the data that we need is absent. Not so much, I mean, there is data. I can go to the Felden station 15 miles away and get data there. And we do also have a redundant weather sensor array here that's perhaps not as high quality as a Messinet, but it is the data that we have. When I say data are needed or absent, it's the alignment of the data with the phenologic models and the mitigation methods that are needed to be able to help us to do our job better. So we need the data. The data that we need doesn't exist, like the phenologies. I'm talking about phenological data. And then two, the calibrated phenological models are absent. So we need not only the climatic data, but the life cycle plant models that would tell us what's going to happen and when it's going to happen, so that we can get things done at the right times within the season for all of our many species. And third, the mitigation methods calibrated to those phenological models that are based on climatic data. So it's kind of a three-prong approach to how we are planning to use the climatic data. So we're collecting the data. This year, we're focused on capturing the data on site, the weather data, and going point forward, we'll be collecting that data. Two, observing and compiling phenologies, our life cycles, not only for each plant species. As I mentioned, we have 120 species plus another, 300 cultivars among them. I record those every week. And in fact, after we get done with our session today, I'll be out and I'll be doing my weekly phenological record for the entire orchard and growth. But we'll also be doing that for every pest and disease that impacts our orchard. And we do have several diseases and we have several pests that are of interest that we want to be able to address proactively point forward. And three, once we collect that data, then we'll be testing agents sanctioned for organic use on our many species. We're focusing on organic agents this year. In the future, we will be integrating possibly other agents that have ecologic suitability for our orchard. So basically the data, the phenologies, and then the mitigation of pests and diseases in our orchard. So we commenced trap monitoring, which is very data intensive. It's based on a growing degree day curve. We commenced that in 2020 and are developing alternative sustainable spray programs to align with a formal phenologically defined sustainable integrated pest and disease mitigation strategy that minimizes chemical inputs yet maximizes safe, effective, marketable fruit. So how do we use the climatic data? Well, as I mentioned, phenology lies at our very core of our technical program. That is the capturing and execution on the known life succession among plants, pests, and pathogens in response to weather changes in a predictable way to guide and optimize our operations and mitigation strategies. So the theory is that there is a progression of life stages following the growing degree days for each plant and pest species, and a set of thermal wetness conditions defining pathogen infection probability. So it's very data intensive and you need models and data to determine the relevant mitigation activities. A couple of examples of this is, I'll share one or two examples. So for example, most fungus mitigation guides recommend that you, quote, spray prior to fruit being infected by fungus. So if you spray after the plant is infected, it's too late. You've already lost your crop for that year. The fungus will take out your leaves as well as any of your fruits. So you need to be able to spray before it's infected, which is typically, for many of the fungal infections, is in the early spring, right around 30 degrees, right around freezing time, just as your leaves are just starting to come out. So the question then becomes, well, when is that? When does a fungus infect my different species? And it may not be the same from species to species. So under what conditions do different fungus attack different fruits? What should I spray? And when should I spray it? An example of that that we've experienced this year is the application of copper hydroxide for a fungus known as peach leaf curl, which affects peaches and nectarines. And we didn't know exactly when this fungus would infect. We've been asking. Michigan State has given us some guidance on that, so we know better. But at the time, we didn't know what the phenology of the peach trees was. So we've got about 20 different cultivars of peaches and nectarines, but they all respond differently. They come out at different times. So one of the ones that was very early, I had to underspray with respect to copper hydroxide because copper hydroxide burns the leaves of that plant. So if I spray it after the leaves already come out, well, then I'm going to kill the leaves on the tree. So I need to get it sprayed on there just before the leaves come out. I don't want to do it much earlier though, because the copper hydroxide washes off and I don't get the same efficacy if I get it on there. So I need to know what the life cycle is of all of my 450 trees and shrubs and vines, so that I can plan my operation so that, you know, assuming that there is a degree day curve and that many of these things, particularly pests, follow that, then I can spray the right things at the right time. In most cases, I can't spray after the foliage. I can't spray copper after the foliage has already come out. So I need to know when things are going to leaf out so that I can get my copper on there in time, for example. And there are hosts of other things that need to be considered in this kind of a data intensive pest and disease mitigation model. So that's one example. So in the case of the peach leaf curl, for example, I undersprayed that tree, and sure enough, temperatures hit about 31, 32. We had some rainy days, and the new leaves all went into peach leaf curl, and, you know, so much for that tree this year. Fortunately, 90% of the trees are unaffected because I got them at the right time. But next year, because I've now got the data on-site data on my farm, I'm going to know when that peach tree is going to leaf out. I'm going to say, okay, well, I need to be sure that on growing degree day 257, I need to be sure that I have all of those relevant species and trees sprayed with copper at the correct concentration, so that when those leaves come out, everything is protected. So in contrast to what Bob was saying about day-to-day or maybe week-to-week data, for us, it's more so the cumulative weather data that is important. I need to know the full degree day progression starting day one of the year to know, okay, this is going to happen. My trees are going to leaf out, my trees are going to flower, my trees are going to petal fall, and then after petal fall, then I'm going to get fruiting. So I need to be able to schedule all of my activities with respect to the growing degree day curve. So that's important to us. So as I said, I've been asking some of these questions of Purdue Extension. It's been very challenging to get answers on when different fungus attacks different fruits, when I should set traps. You know, Michigan State has a very well-developed program, not only with respect to quantitative phenological measurements. They have their EnviroWeather Center that they, for their residents within Michigan State, they can either dial into their local station, or they can even use their own specific location and say, okay, tell me, apple scab, what should I be doing right now in my orchard if I have apples? And same thing with Cornell over in New York. They have an incredible phenological model where you can plug in your location and say, okay, I got blueberries and I'm wanting to avoid blueberry mummy fungus. Okay, so what do I need to do for my blueberries? And so any day of the year, you can go on there and they have the full phenologies defined for many species, not nearly, they don't have 110 species, but they have maybe a handful of species with the most common diseases and pests. And they can tell you when you should set your traps and when you should spray your sprays and when you should expect this or that or the other. And so it's very proactive approach. And so I would like to see something like that for Indiana over the long term. I know it's a big ask, and I think one of the challenges that from my observations is that I feel there's a big disconnect. We only have a few representatives from Extension here today, And that's not unusual. It's kind of what I've been seeing for some time. But in any case, we are building those relationships. It may be that we have to extract from the published models from other states to be able to put together our model, but we also need to test and validate the models that are available in other states. For example, Dr. Jana Beckerman, who's the Purdue pathologist, she says that the models that are developed in other states probably won't work here because we have much higher pest and disease issues in Indiana, particularly in southern Indiana, where it's humid and a little more hot. And that may be, but unfortunately, there are no models for Indiana, at least that are available. So, I mean, my option is to either to completely give up and just not follow any kind of a phenological integrated pest management program, or to borrow, test, and validate models that are developed in other states and bring them here and test them so that I can run my orchard in a more quantitative, efficient way. And so that's the option that I'm up against and that I'm looking forward to carrying out. So in any case, those phenological trends are then aligned to the best target mitigation of pests or diseases at the best time to knock pests or diseases out at the right biological time for the plant pest or disease, but also to quantitatively reduce the volume of materials, which are quite expensive, and also the labor, which is costly, and minimize the materials as basis for minimizing ecologic impact by reducing agent volumes, yet maximizing efficacy of those agents. So the bad news is that most of the data that we need, the phenologies, the pest disease models, trap monitoring strategies, mitigation strategies, are unavailable in Indiana. And there's no way to access these in other states because those models are not integrated because they are foreign out-of-state models. We can't access our own data, be it on-site or one of the Messinet stations are not tied into those. So we can't really make use of those. So it's kind of one of my big challenges to try to integrate models when I don't have any within the state. So unless both the data and the phenologies are in place, the climatic data and the phenologies in place, no real integrated pest disease mitigation strategy can take place or is appropriate. Both of those need to be in place. And there's no data within our county. We do have interpolated data. Typically that's at least 5 degrees off of my on-site situation. We're a little bit of an elevated state. We're in kind of a forest, so those data coming from the lowland areas are not necessarily directly relevant to us up here in the Shawnee Hills. And oftentimes the data needed at near frost temperatures is too far away to support our operations. So say, for example, 12 miles away, we have a Bloomfield station, which is our county seat, and it's recording temperature that's about 5 degrees warmer that we've had here. And if I'm looking at a kill temperature between 28 and 30 degrees, that amount of accuracy is quite literally the difference in life and death of our blossoms here and our various species of fruit trees. So we really do need to have the on-site support. Currently, we've taken the option of a relatively inexpensive set of redundant temperature and rain sensors. I'd really like to get a Messinet quality station out here. I've talked with Beth about this. We've had a couple of conversations, and in fact, she supported assistance on one of our grant proposals from last year that unfortunately didn't get funded, but we would really like to have a robust station to underlie our research here as well as our operations. And it's actually a win-win situation because, even though we don't have those phenological models today in the state that are available, if you have a well-calibrated phenologic curve based on a robust calibrated weather station, and you have the phenological operations, and we have more than enough species and cultivars to be able to establish these curves, as well as the phenologies, then you can extrapolate to other locations using a well-calibrated degree day curve. So, having something like that available with our research here at the Shawnee Hills Farm Permaculture Research Station that can be scaled within a reasonable distance. Obviously, you can't use this if we have brown marmorated stink bugs, which is one of our pests, and Japanese beetles. If you're in a part of the country where you don't have Japanese beetles, well, then probably, you know, it's not going to be relevant to you. But certainly within southern Indiana and surrounds, it would be probably advantageous to anybody who's trying to grow an orchard or perennial fruit trees. To have something like that available within the state, I think would be quite advantageous. Certainly it will become the basis for our business point forward. So let's see. So as I mentioned, we don't really have any data from Greene County. There was once a NOAA site with a county seat that did record precipitation data, which was nice, but really temperature is very critical, as well as leaf moisture. Eventually we'll have leaf moisture data, but we don't have that today. But you know, the growing degree day curve is principally a temperature instrument, and so temperature is very critical to us. And I'm glad that we at least have something. We have our own, you know, inexpensive, redundant array of temperature sensors to establish. This year we have that established. So all the phenological data that I've collected over the year for the 110 species, then I will be able to tie that to a quantitative growing degree curve. That point forward will continue to improve over time. So I'm excited about that. So Dr. Hall at the Indiana State Climatology Office, she's been quite helpful in supporting our efforts at getting a climatic footing in place to support our operations and research. As I mentioned, she provided some of the chilling hours. So we learned, yeah, we're doing pretty well in the chilling hours front. That's not a problem. Enjoyed the national maps, and we do have some out-of-county data that we used. Davies County to the south, Monroe to the northeast, and Bedford to the southeast. Those are our nearest stations at the various airports for the most part. So that's nice. We do have some offset data. We also have the Messenet station, the Felden Research Station. That's 15 miles to east, which is a quality station. And so we do use that data. I'll go into that a little bit. So as I mentioned, we have our own station for the moment. We talked about getting a station here to underlie our research, but as well as to enable possible collaboration with others who may be interested in growing orchards and integrating some kind of an integrated pest management system on their orchards. The only thing I would say about the stations is we actually prefer, you know, there's a modified growing degree day algorithm that's used for growing degree day curves, phenologic curves. We actually prefer the Baskerville-Emin, which is a different algorithm that Dr. Andresen up in Michigan promotes. It's a sinusoidal thing. It does a better job. It's a little more accurate if all you have are minimum maximum days or minimum, if you have thermal extrema at a daily level, it does a little bit better job of calculating your growing degree days. But to be perfectly honest with you, now that we have hourly data, we just kind of accumulate the hourly degree day totals from our hourly data. It's kind of what we prefer. So we use our own data, but we also take the data from your site, the minimum and the maximum data, and then we actually take it over to the University of California's website. They have a you can calculate the Emin Baskerville model on there. You can also do it yourself, but it's kind of tricky. So we calculate it on our own spreadsheets here from those two research stations, Purdue research stations, plus our own data. But then we run it through the University of California's calculator as well, just as a double check, because some of those calculations, the modified growing degree data is pretty easy to calculate, but not necessarily accurate. But the Emin Baskerville is a little more challenging, so we run a double check on that. And so then we use the two research stations, the Throckmorton and the Felden, as an envelope to our actual station, assuming, so in other words, then we feel more comfortable that whatever we're calculating here should be between those two end members. So as I mentioned, without the phenologies and the quantitative mitigation strategies that other states have, the data is limited actionable utility. As I mentioned, we had a grant proposal that didn't get funded. But as I said, if we could get together with a robust data set, plus our phenologies, plus our tests and our trapping and monitoring and all such things, then that information could be used by others.
Right, right.
So then, so we also need the data to define freeze events and horticultural resilience, as these are quite locally measured in nature. The data from nearby counties is not necessarily to the degree that we need to understand whether or not we've hit 28 or 30 degrees. If we look at the surrounding counties data, it's not, it's good. I mean, it's helpful to know that they reached 30, but maybe we're at 27. And, you know, that helps us to know whether or not we're going to have any apricots this year, for example, because those are the earliest to blossom and the most susceptible to frost damage. So let's see, I'm kind of going quite a wrap up here. So as I mentioned, we don't have a county provider. The Purdue Mesonite, it's really nice, solid data set. It's robust, it's calibrated, but not necessarily close enough to tie into our on-site research. There's slightly different microclimate effects that we're worried about. But boy, we'd really love to have a Mesonet station here on Shawnee Hills Farm. Let's see. We don't have the phenologic framework, but the good news is because we're very proactive, we will have the phenologic framework. We will have the basis for phenologies in place here at Shawnee Hills Farm. We're doing trap monitoring and measurement, so we will have that. I've made contact with other states who are carrying out phenological research and testing not only on pests, but also key fungal infections to know when are the conditions that are right for fungal infections so that we can more proactively engage our pests and diseases. And so then point forward, then we'll be able to test different agents. So all these things are kind of cumulative, you see. So we need the data. We're starting to get the data. We need the phenologies. We're starting to get the phenologies. We need the trap monitoring. We're starting to get that. So we're starting to build a quantitative framework in summary. And so we're really excited about that. And the opportunity to devise a sustainable quantitative orchard phenological foundation for not only for us, but for others who may be interested in trying to integrate some kind of a quantitative orchard management strategy.
Thanks, Melanie. Yeah, I think the challenge is for agriculture. When we think agriculture in Indiana, we think corn and soybeans. But as you've pointed out, there's more to that. And I think what you're doing should help a lot of other growers. I know in the chat, there are some hopefully helpful links to some of the things you were looking at. I think some people want to come down and visit your farm. Some questions about, you know, just different crops and maybe guesses on, is this going to expand in Indiana or not? So I'll let you look through that, maybe respond, but for the sake of time, I want to get to our next panelist, Stacy. So Stacy, if you can introduce yourself and tell us who you're with, who your stakeholders are, and how climate works with your program.
Well, hello, thank you for letting me chime in a little bit on the summit over the last couple of days here. So I'm Stacy Herr with the Indiana Pork Producers, and our organization represents our 3,000 pork producers in the state who pay checkoff dollars. So I think an important point for everyone to understand is that, you know, pork production is intrinsically related to corn and soybean production in the state. We raise pigs here because we also raise corn and soybeans. It is our main feed ingredients, and it makes for a really nice combination. So the efforts that are put forth in corn and soybean resiliency, you know, tools to assist in that actually are of great benefit to us, because while we, you know, don't necessarily, we don't necessarily operate separately, right? Most of my pork producers are also corn and soybean producers, and they utilize manure from their, you know, pork production operations as a nutrient resource in their corn and soybean operations. So much as you might be, you know, trying to predict when can I apply fertilizer nutrients, when can I apply my manure nutrients as well. So I think Dr. Nielsen really hit the nail on the head, and in particular in manure application, we need to be able to determine short term when is the best time to get out there to apply manure, as well as when, if we aren't going to be able to apply manure. So we are a regulated industry. So we do have almost, the majority of our manure storage is undercover in Indiana. If you're not from Indiana and aren't familiar, we don't have a lot of open lagoon type storage that you might see, historically in other states. But we do have a limited containment. So most of our facilities can get a little over a year of storage in their barns. That's even, our south facilities now. But understanding that there's going to be an extremely wet seasonal pattern, and it's going to force us to not be able to be applying manure in, the next 3 to 4 weeks is extremely important information to us, because I might not have 3 to 4 weeks of storage. And because I'm a regulated industry, I have to be able to manage my nutrients. So I can't just say, oh, well, we'll just do this with it. We have to fit within that frame of our regulations. So any tool that's being developed on the row crop side is probably just also applicable in the pork world in general. I do think that one of the things that maybe is a bit different, and not really, but something you may not consider, is that a lot of our manure application is done through custom applicators. So that's someone's business. So they're also managing, a number of clients. If they can have a predictive ability to say that this is a better area for me to move my equipment and my application equipment to for the next 2 weeks, that is a great benefit to them. And we're also fitting our application into all of the row crop application and actually planting. So it's all integrated together. And I don't know that individual tools specific to a pork producer would really be a benefit. It has to talk together. It all has to work together. In general, I don't know that pork producers, which are also row crop farmers, I have to agree that they're even really aware of all of the data that's collected or that's available for their use. I think that, while there is a ton of information available, it has to be a very applicable type of interface for a producer. So I better be able to, as Dr. Nielsen said, just check my app to see what your predictions may be. And I also think that going forward, all of the data that's collected, all the data that's managed, certainly sustainability is huge. It's not going to go away. And there's all of these private sector platforms that, are going to have data integrated into them so that we can, establish a level of sustainability, which may even impact our ability to market a product. And so how can all of this data that's generated at Purdue and through our national agencies that are doing all this climate research, how can that get integrated into these private sector tools, which a producer may end up being forced to use, quite frankly, depending on what systems they're involved in. So I think that's a much bigger long-term point, but one that I think might prove valuable for the climate services. So thank you for inviting me, and I definitely learned a lot. There's a lot available. So
thanks, Stacy. That's great. For someone who's not certainly an expert in agriculture, I didn't appreciate not only the linkage between the row crops and the pork production, but also the storage issue of where do you put all of that if you can't get out there? I'd like to open it up. I think I saw, just based on participant lists, that there's some other people that could have some on the ground experience. Jason with Beck Seeds, Anna Morrow with the Midwest Cover Crop Council. There might be others. Are any of you willing to speak up and kind of give your perspective on climate data, climate usage, where there are gaps between the data and tools and how you use them? I don't know if Ben Wicker is still on as well.
This is Anna Morrow.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give you kind of a quick rundown. The Midwest Cover Crops Council works on tools for producers and crop advisors, helping them plan for cover crops. And so, you heard Bob kind of focusing on the summer annual crops, where those spring frosts are very important and accumulating growing degree days. And we're looking at more of the like winter cereals. And so we're really interested in those fall frost dates. We do use the spring frost dates to kind of bookend our growing season. So in our current cover crop decision tool, we use the 10, 50, and 90% chance of a 28-degree frost to kind of set up our growing season. And we interpolate that data across the whole Midwest to give county specific recommendations. So we're interested in frost dates, both spring and fall. We're probably more focused on the fall dates. And as we continue to build tools, we are going to be looking more at growing degree days to be more predictive of what type of biomass a producer can accumulate from cover crops. And that's going to also, require those frost dates for, predicting dormancy and or frost kill. So that's going to be really important. And as Melanie mentioned, I think as we have, I'm hoping we have more diversity incorporated, more cover crops, more winter crops, perennials, that we're going to be more focused on those growing degree days throughout the year. So I think that's just an important point to make known. And then as far as I'm concerned, we are really interested in the accessibility of data. So if we can tap into this climate data, growing degree days, frost dates, with a simple API, so that we can pull that information and incorporate it very simply into our tools, that's something that we're interested in. We're hoping to be more predictive instead of just taking climate averages and saying this is a good planting time frame. We're hoping to get to the point to where we can look more at the termination side of cover crops and say take in some forecast data and say, well, the forecast is looking wet or dry or hot, and these are some termination recommendations based on your biomass goals and a number of other things. So I think making the data that's available more accessible through downloading those, because I'm looking at Midwestern data. So if I could download the whole Midwest frost dates, 30-year averages, that would be fantastic. So that's just a quick rundown of some things that I would be interested in for my particular area of agriculture.
That's great. And I will add, so since you are a Midwest coverage thing, there's the Midwest Regional Climate Center, and a lot of that data is accessible through APIs. So it is from, I think, predominantly not the Mesonettes. I think only Missouri Mesonet might be in there. I think I saw Mike Timlin was on, but for those from the cooperative network, it's just a variety of data that is out there, airport data. If you want to drop a call or an email to the MRCC and say, hey, how can I access this data through API? So I'm not having to do it manually every day. We can set up a script. There are those options. And I know from the State Climate Office for our Mesonet, we have it on our list fairly high up, I would think sometime this summer, to be able to establish an API type of means so that people could write scripts to automatically pull that data. Oh, and all my little picture windows. Jason, now as I see you, did you want to say a few words about how it works with you, impacts you in your production?
Sure. Thanks for organizing this event here, and a lot of information to cover here yesterday morning and this morning. One of the things that I don't know that I heard much talk about was wind forecasting. I saw yesterday there was some inversion tools and some things like that that the industry, or that where farmers are needing to work with, particularly dicamba products, and some of those gain more wide use. From a seed corn production standpoint, one of the things that the tools that I wish we had that I don't believe exists is a helpful way to see wind at a very specific location and in a kind of an over a maybe 10 to 14 day period of time. I'm thinking about specifically the pollination window for corn, and Bob, you might have touched on that. I was on and off of a phone call there when you were giving your presentation, so you may have missed it. But basically, that pollinating window for the corn crop requires some wind movement, particularly in seed corn production, to get the pollen to the silk, and which direction that's coming out of, and some of those kinds of things. I could maybe more specifically talk about ways that I've tried to do that ourselves, but I guess I would see that as maybe a missing product. But a lot of the material that I would say that many of the groups that have presented here are very, very valuable and very useful by row crop farmers, GDDs, just all kinds of predictive tools. In fact, it got to the point where 3 or 4 years ago, there was too much information as a team, and I'm leading teams that are managing processes in Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And we're like, we got to get kind of on the same page. And so we went to a private company, BAM Weather. Many of you may know Michael Clark and the BAM team out of Franklin, Indiana, that does kind of private forecasting. And we just said, hey, we need to be able to have someone that can like boil this down in less than 10 minutes, does all the research, understands all the models, understands all of this stuff, and be able to get it. I need less than 10 minutes, kind of a tool to digest. And so we've been doing that for 3 or 4 years. And I feel like that's really, there's still the cone of things that we don't know, or if someone talked about that cone of not knowing, as time goes along, but there's still all of that, but nevertheless, being able to get it concise, I think is really important to us. So I wanted to add, I guess, those couple of comments, but appreciate this group here.
Yeah, no, that's really very helpful. And wind data is so tricky because it can be relatively localized, sort of like precipitation. That's why, we had that CocoRa's program. Maybe we need a CocoRa's program where everybody's just doing wind measurements or something to try and capture that. Also, so you and Anna were talking more outside the state, covering more regionally. And I think that is a role that the regional climate centers can try and help fill. It's always a challenge because, as I said, a lot of states have their own mesonettes, and they're not, because they need financial support to keep those running, they're not too excited to just hand the data over so people can have it for free, because then they've just undermined their own financial stream. But that regional mesonet program, I think I showed a couple maps, and others might have shown it. I wonder if there's a way that we could set it up so that there's just maybe graphical, people have to go to the source to get the actual data, and that's where they could pay for it. But if you just want a monitoring tool. So I know I will be, as I'm taking over the MRCC, I'll try and see if we can develop something more on a regional scale that does merge a lot of these mesonet data. Is there anyone else? I'm trying to skim through names, but please speak up. If even if you have a small farm, or if you just have some input from the agricultural side that you want to give your 2 cents of where things are going well with climate services and where things really, there's gaps, things need to improve with respect to climate services. I know I did have a couple oh, yes, Sam?
Hey, Beth, this is Sam. I just wanted to go back to Bob Nielsen's comments that he made. I found some really good information in there with respect to the confidence in the 6 to 10 day forecast. And we do struggle with that, although, we're much better than we were, say, 5 or 10 years ago with respect to the general pattern. And an example I'll give is like right now, the 6 to 10 day outlook, we're in the 75% probability for above normal temperatures. And you can start to sort of get confidence out of those higher percentages on their temperature and precipitation outlook. So when I start to see the 60 to 70, 75% range, that usually verifies pretty accurately in that 6 to 10 days. So that's something to keep an eye on just for generalities. Now, that doesn't mean you might have a day built in there with some rain chances, but that's the average for that period. And then real quickly, the other thing he mentioned, that he looks at multiple weather service, looks at the weather service, looks at AccuWeather. We do the same thing in the meteorology world. We look at many different models, and then we put together what we call the ensemble and sort of take the mean in many cases. So that's not a bad thing. All we ask is if you're getting your weather data, get it from reliable sources. That's the most important part. You will see a lot of socio-meteorologists on Facebook and Twitter putting out rainfall and snowfall maps that are just bogus. So, just stick to those reliable weather services that are out there. BAM Weather was just mentioned. That's a great private local entity. Degreed meteorologist is what you want to stick with. So I just wanted to address those points. This has been a really fantastic panelist, and we've learned a lot here. We're having internal chats here at the Weather Service about maybe things we can do and improve and get out and visit people. So thanks everyone for the input and the discussion. Very, very good stuff today.
And if you're following on the agenda, we're going to have a break right now, but I had a couple questions myself that I wanted to pose to the panelists and the extended panelists, Jason and Anna. So I'll have that kind of replace that kind of 15-minute session right after the break. So I want to go maybe 10, 15 minutes longer, then we'll break, come back, and then Melissa will do the final session. But when I was writing down questions that I'm curious to hear about, some of you mentioned mobile devices and having tools, resources on mobile devices so that when you're out in the field, you have that immediate decision. It's tough to do that. On one hand, I'm thinking, okay, but climate data is different than forecast data. And how necessary is it these days to be able to look at these climate services, climate resources on a mobile device, as opposed to just like on a desktop? Like I'm thinking if you're just curious about what rain fell in the last 7 days or 15 days or 30 days, is that something you need mobile when you're out in the field? And I just don't know. So anybody want to comment on that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last question?
How important is it to have any sort of services, climate tools online, but available in a meaningful way on a mobile device, like a smartphone or a tablet?
Well, I tell you that, several times a day, I do use the online forecast. I just use, I'm probably going to upgrade based on our discussions today. I don't know necessarily what the available ones are from our partners here, but would be interested in knowing about that. I just Google weather or whatever it is, whatever I have on my smartphone, just to see what the near-term forecast is. Like right now it's raining. I need to go out and collect all the phenologies in my orchard. And I'm wondering about what time of day I might be able to do that. So I do use that. many times a day. But, you know, I was thinking the same thing when we were looking at the Weather Service, wondering if we had a mobile source, that maybe that might become my preferred provider point forward. But I would like to see some of the items, like even the cocoa raws, on a mobile platform for sure.
Okay. Yeah, some of them are mobile friendly, but that's a little bit different than having it designed in that native platform. Bob?
Well, I was going to say, so for use when scheduling and planning my drone flights, there is an app called UAV Forecast. I believe they're basing it off of Dark Sky and maybe doing some further tweaks. But for that particular use, where again, I'm trying to schedule my day, and do I go north, do I go south to fly, that forecast, or that UAV Forecast app has been actually pretty accurate. And in particular, it gives me wind speeds at the altitude I'll be flying, or the estimates, the forecast of wind speeds at you know, any altitude I choose to put it, depending on where I'm flying that day. Gives me estimates of cloud cover during the day on an hourly basis, wind and wind gusts, and rain chances. Again, for at least that day, that's been pretty accurate for me. And I've often thought the wind forecasting option with that tool, I think maybe the lowest altitude you can select might be sort of the standard 33 feet, but nevertheless, possibly from a spray operation, that also might be a useful tool in terms of pesticide applications and trying to stay under, you know, avoiding the gusty days and this and that. So that kind of an app is useful for that specific purpose for me. Other than that, you know, again, I rely on sort of the simple commercial apps like AccuWeather and NWS and you know, Weather Channel, and you know, like I said before, I sort of look at all of them, and you know, and sort of with regard to that probability on the 6 to 10 day, I hadn't thought about that before, but again, as I look at these forecasts, you know, when I see these forecasts staying pretty much the same for several days, you know, looking out, that tells me then that must be a more stable weather system setting up, easier to forecast, and my own confidence level goes up. But when I check it today and tomorrow's totally different, and the third day after that's totally different, that's telling me, okay, it's a very difficult forecasting system. Okay, I understand that. And so again, I sort of, I guess, indirectly or informally in my head, I'm developing my own ensemble. I hadn't thought about the fact I was, you know, being so professional developing ensembles, but I'm going to start using that term now.
There you go. There you go. Does anyone else on the call, whether it's our planning team or presenters or just anyone else, have a question for the panelists that might help you?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment going back to your last question, Beth. And I don't know that it needs discussion. I just want to put it out there. I feel like a lot of times in climate services, we sort of jump between worlds of weather forecasting and climate services, weather data and climate data. And so when you ask the question about if we really need climate data accessible on mobile devices, you know, I think about when are people going to be thinking about their climate data? It might be while they're, you know, the conversation might be coming up, or the decision, the planning might be coming up in the context of weather, in which case having it mobile friendly or, you know, built into that mobile environment would be very beneficial. We had these same conversations in the UTU project for the Useful to Usable project, which was a USDA funded project a few years back, trying to improve weather and climate data for Midwest farmers. And we had that same challenge because the resources that go into creating something in the mobile platform, was it worth us diverting those resources into doing that very well versus, you know, compared to putting those resources towards tool development in an online environment, a desktop environment. And so I really think I still struggle with this question, and I don't know that there's a good answer, because we do just keep falling in between this weather and climate viewing, right? It's hard to just isolate yourself in one or the other, because we often are thinking about climate data, planning for climate in the context of our weather.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, I don't have a question or necessarily any discussion other than acknowledging that that's tricky, and I don't know what the right answer is for if these need to be mobile friendly. You know, if I'm trying, like if you go to the UTU corn growing degree day tool, it's very challenging to use it on a mobile device, even though we tried to make it mobile friendly.
Mm-hmm.
But we just couldn't put the resources into making a mobile app. We didn't know if it was worthwhile. And so what's the balance? How do you decide where to put those resources? Good luck with that.
Anyone else have a comment or a question for the panel?
Beth, your regionalization discussion that has come up several times is clearly a problem in the way of agricultural issues because of the variability of types of data from one state to another state or density of those. That's something we've had some discussions with Beth about in regionalization of information through the MRCC from an agricultural standpoint. There are also some various tools that are developed for certain states that haven't been regionalized yet that could be done and provide various information. So this is a great conversation actually to be having as to types of information, and then trying to figure out how to multi-purpose some of these things, because you may want this specific thing, but there may be three people who want something very similar. So how do we create one thing that can be usable for all three different types of applications? The example I'm thinking of is the cover crop issue in growing degree days. We're having discussions with NRCS about changing some standards on practices of planting, for example, instead of using specific calendar dates, but to be appropriate conditions. Growing degree days and precipitation would be one things that would influence those instead of using hard calendar dates, these types of conditions. So trying to multi-purpose some of these things are things that we would like to try to help in this regionalization effort.
I know I am curious. A couple of you said that, wow, this was a lot of information. There's a lot of tools out there, and we just don't think the growers are aware of it. We just don't think that a lot of people are aware of all the resources out there. So I don't know if this is the right place, but I feel like I need to start having some conversations with the extension program and with other groups to try and figure out how can we disseminate this information? How do we train more people, expose all of the resources that really are out there? Because, you know, you can't just have a summit, you know, like this all the time. And even still, I think we peaked around 55 participants, and you know that there's a lot more people across the state that weren't on this summit. And so how do we move forward from there to try and educate those?
Yeah, Beth, can I throw in one more thing too? It's another problem of how do you make it so people can find them? Because Melissa was getting at this forecast information. That's kind of the purview of the National Weather Service. Okay, but they don't have the ability to put a wide range of different things on their websites. So other tools need to sit other places. Where can that be a common site so that people can find them instead of people having to go to 5 or 6 different places to find the appropriate thing that they want to find? Because they're not going to do that. They're not going to remember that. Even if it's a good tool, where was that? Where can I find that? So how do we create a common site or common way for people to access and find this information?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I those who are here from the Weather Service probably know the history better than I do, but my understanding is years ago, there was an ag meteorologist, an ag specialist, and they decided to discontinue that program and have the private sector pick up that need. And so unfortunately, we have a lot of great meteorologists and experts with the Weather Service, but they're sort of walking a thin line if they try and tailor things more to ag. and a lot of the services that we talked about yesterday and today are actually free. You don't have to subscribe to, this company's app or that company's app, but boy, wouldn't it be nice if more and more services were freely available to folks. But so how do we bridge that? Because really the Weather Service is the expert in forecast, but they can't really tailor too much with agriculture, though I know that they want to, and they will do the best they can.
But Beth, I think your office and the Midwest Regional Climate Center are good examples of places that would have, I would say, the freedom to compile, and not just compile, but make it user friendly. Because I smile because I think of Tom Pretty's website down at Kentucky, which is a wonderful website for ag weather, but his own particular style of creating web pages is so convoluted, it's unbelievable. But there's some good stuff there. So the challenge is, how do you compile it and make it user friendly in terms of finding it all? But I would think that'd be in the purview of the Indiana State Climate Office and or the Midwest Regional Climate Center, and then that would be that one-stop shop that Dennis was talking about, where people like me or other extension agronomists or whoever, we could point the clientele and say, well, go to the State Climate Office website because they have compiled all of this great free information in a findable, usable, searchable way. But, go there because it's there. Because, again, seems to me those are yours, and maybe the MRCC would be the logical places to do that. So I don't know.
I love it. And maybe that's how we should end this session, is saying, I have a lot of work ahead of me and I'm excited to help. So why don't we take, let's just do a 10-minute break this time, if you guys don't mind. If we can end early, that would be great. But so we're about 11:32. Let's try and come back right before, what would that be? 11:45, so maybe 11:42, 43. Kind of come back in, and then Melissa will wrap it up with another discussion of where do we go from here?
We're going to build off of what we were just ending on. So that's a good segue.
All right. Well, welcome back from the break. We have the last session now of the summit. And Melissa, are you ready to take it away?
Sure. Are you saying everybody's ready to go? Let's get this show on the road.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first thing I want to do is, if you have a camera, I want to invite you to turn your camera on. Beth, turned your camera off. Ooh. Since we do want this to be more of a discussion, it's always nice to see people's faces. No pressure. If you don't want to turn the camera on, you don't have a camera, totally fine. I'm just putting the invitation out there so you can feel like we value your face and seeing you. The next thing I want to do, I just popped into the chat box a reminder of our overall summit objectives. And I won't read through all of them, but I do want to point specifically to objective 3, improve coordination and collaboration among climate service providers and agricultural advisors, decision makers, and partners at the local, state, regional, and national levels. So I think that would include every single person who's here today, plus people who aren't here. But the reason I want to point to that one specifically, we really, spent the last 2 days talking about a ton of tools, services, other types of things that are available for the agricultural community, building that awareness. We hit on item 2 quite a bit today, especially with our last session, really talking about what are the gaps, what are the needs. I know there's more out there, but we started the conversation. But here with number 3, this is really where our wrap up comes in. And also to some extent, number 4, right? What does this mean? Where do we go from here? And so to help us a bit think through some of these, I have a few questions. I'm going to share my screen. And then I'm going to pop into the chat the link. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Padlet. It's kind of fun. It is an interactive tool. You can just click the button and type something. You don't have to have a login, so it's pretty user friendly. But as we go, we'll take notes on this page here. If you don't feel like unmuting yourself and talking, go ahead and type it in. If you want to unmute yourself and talk, we can do that too. But this is just a way for us to record and capture our thoughts. So really this guiding question is, where do we go from here? So that first question, what might Indiana Climate Service Network for Agriculture actually look like? Okay. If we're talking about building this network, if we're talking about having this improved coordination and collaboration, what does the leadership, who is the leadership here? What is the membership? Are we talking formal, informal? What should be our mission, the purpose? What benefits would you have as a part of this network? So this is really just to brainstorm, you know, in your opinion. Somebody has Padlet blocked. Okay, that's all right. If you type it in the chat, we can always pop it in there. I assume you can still see my screen. So thoughts on that? If you're just imagining, and this was a little bit of homework too from last night, so hopefully you've thought about this. What does an Ag Climate Services Network look like in Indiana? So take a moment, think about it. Feel free to unmute yourself, type in the chat. I won't move on just because people need time to talk, time to think.
I'm sorry, Melissa, how did you say that you add to this, or do we put it in the chat?
So there's this little plus button, if you see where I'm kind of hovering over in any of these columns. So each column, when you hit the plus button, you should see a pop-up, and then you should be able to type something. Somebody wrote long-term planning, water availability, crop. Maybe add your name too, if you're adding information, so we can tie it back. You can be anonymous, but like I said,
we can
you
do
can
this
just
from
unmute and talk too.
We can do this from within Zoom, or do we have to go via another website?
There is a link in the chat.
Ah,
yes.
There we go.
There you go. You can see I put up a few other questions too while people are thinking about their responses. You know, what kind of activities, what does this service look like? What does this network look like? How do we keep people engaged? What things are we doing? Who is we, right? Who's a part of this, and why would they want to be a part of this? Oh, good. I see and hear typing. All right, so as people are starting to do this, let's go ahead and open this up for verbal discussion too. So what might this network look like? Does anybody want to share their thoughts on what they could envision a purpose or a mission being for such a group? Who might be the lead? I heard earlier, you know, Indiana State Climate Office or MRCC seem like natural leads in this area. Maybe there's other groups that feel strongly about being a lead. Maybe there's a leadership model approach that we should be thinking about, you know, more of a coalition to provide these services. And then, you know, what are these services? What would such a group be doing? Anyone want to unmute and chime in?
All right, I'll break the ice here. This is Earl with the Weather Service in Indianapolis. I think Beth was expecting that, so there we go. You know, one of the things I like about, you know, having this conversation, especially whenever we get a chance to participate in the climate conferences, is seeing how many people are really interested in how they use the data and the needs that we're not meeting as a federal agency. And so what I would say, you know, kind of this, what might an Indiana Climate Services Network for Agriculture look like? From my standpoint, this is a great question to be asking right now, because the National Weather Service's co-op program is kind of in the midst of a retooling, if you will. You know, a lot of our equipment while it's still high quality, climate compatible equipment, is kind of old, and we're modernizing a lot of it. And they're having a lot of these types of discussions at the national level about what the future of the co-op program should look like to be able to meet needs like this. So what I would say is when we think about this, make sure you get, Beth, make sure you get like the findings and the stuff to me so I can ship it up from my end to Amy at National Weather Service headquarters. So as she's starting to do requisition orders and look at funding for the future of co-op program, maybe we can fit some of these needs in. So I just appreciate you putting this on and giving us an opportunity to hear our customers talk and learn something.
I'll make a comment on what I posted almost from the tangible side, where under that far left column, I said, well, communications. I mean, we can say there's a network, but I think there needs to be a focused effort to have regular engagement, regular communication. Now, does that mean an annual workshop? I can say that workshops take a lot of work, but maybe once a year that's okay. But if there's even quarterly calls, and I know Mike Ryan and Sam organize quarterly climate team calls around the state, but if there's something that's perhaps more ag focused, there could be newsletter, again, a monthly newsletter. It can be a little daunting, but if it's a seasonal newsletter, that might make more sense from a climatological standpoint, where that newsletter could highlight one or two tools that are out there, and that could be disseminated across a listserv that's fairly open for people to sign up for. Yes, there's the extension newsletters and so forth, but this would be really focused on climate services for ag. And I saw Melanie's point of you need to diversify your ag beyond just the row crops, so to say. So maybe there could even be a section on tools relevant to horticulture, tools that may be relevant to livestock or something that I'm thinking that might help grow the network and provide kind of a back and forth feedback maybe.
Let's keep on this point. What do people think about this? Because I think with a network, communication is key. And certainly we need a mechanism to reach people and let them reach back to us. How do people want to be engaged in this network? What is your preferred method of engagement here? Because otherwise Beth's just going to do it her way. I like your way.
No, I was like, oh yeah. But I think it's a good question, because some people are like, well, why don't we just have a social media page? Why don't we just have a Facebook page of this? But then I get feedback of, well, I'm not a Twitter user. I'm not a Facebook. I'm not on social media. Some people don't like the newsletter idea. They're like, it's just more spam in my inbox and I'm going to shoot it off somewhere. So I'm curious to hear the answer to that from others on.
So the answer is all of the above, Beth, so that you hit everyone's desire.
No, I don't think that's as daunting as it feels, right? If you have a primary mode, say it's through a newsletter at some frequency, then that can live on a website, that can be shared in social media, that can be disseminated through different channels, right? So it's a thing that can be used in lots of ways. And so it feels, when you first say it, all of the above, but I think there are ways to make all of the above not mean a ton of extra work, right? Repurposing one thing in lots of ways.
That's how I've used Twitter. I personally do not like Twitter. I don't get much information out of it, but I realize my clientele do. So I use it to simply as another way of getting my newsletter information out that I publish on my website. And I just use Twitter as one more avenue to get it out to a handful of other people that are not already following the website. So I agree. If it's done smartly, I think it can be less work than it sounds like. But again, I wasn't being facetious. People do get information in different ways. And to be an effective educator, we need to try and use as many of those as we can, whether we personally like them or not. But that's just the way it is in today's world. Everybody has so many different outlets of how they access information.
And I think that's important because there are people who are still not digitally connected. And we
Right.
have to keep those people in mind as well. So there may still need to be some physical copy that is made available at places where people in the ag field tend to congregate, whether that be at the local extension office or at something that we put out to the feed and seeds, where they may get their supplies and things of that sort, or there's just a myriad of different places that folks go. I find out a lot about my local farming neighbors from our ag supplier down the road. And he's always got the latest information about farms for sale, what's going on weather-wise, what's going on crop-wise. So that might be another way to do it, is to find those touch points where we can get information out to those people who are maybe not as digitally comfortable.
And I think that's a great comment that brings us a little bit back, not getting away from the communication part. Let's keep that going too. But, what is this network? Who are we serving? Who benefits from it? What are we delivering, right? Some of that will dictate what kind of communications we want to have.
I think another thing you have to consider is if you want to have the communication going both ways, or if you're trying to just push information out, and you have to take that into account when you're evaluating all these different options for continuing the conversation. Is it a conversation or is it just information that you're trying to get out to people?
Yeah, you would definitely want it to be win-win and have the buy-in of the stakeholders, the end users. I think, what's lingering on my mind is just, I could understand that it would take quite a to-do even to put together a program like this today, that, we need even to have some statewide support. I mean, I don't know how extension is funded or exactly the nature of that beast beyond my awareness as a orchard producer here in Greene County. But, I don't know why we have such a limited number of stations compared to other states, but I just wonder what's going on in the background that, do we have the support that we need from our state leadership? I mean, what is needed to be able to effectively roll these things out to our general populace, as opposed to, one department, state climatology office, singularly with 2-person staff, trying to do all this. I mean, surely there's more support out there, or maybe not, but that's just what's on my mind.
I'm going to let some others chime in on the extension funding question, but I will put it out there before I let them answer that. I think when we're thinking about the network, funding is absolutely critical to think about. And I think it's important to think about what can we do as a volunteer network, sort of a mission oriented, right? We're all engaged because somehow this overlaps with our internal mission, right? In which case we don't necessarily need extra funding to do things that overlap, but we're still going to be limited in our capacity with what we can do, versus new funding or new expanded support that'll let us grow and do more. And so I think both of those things need to be happening, in my opinion. But we shouldn't shut down things that require money, because then we won't go after it. But we shouldn't discount some of those low-hanging fruits that could really be the traction that we need to start to justify the funding. So I would love for somebody else then to just putting that out there as we talk about all these things, you know, what can we do mission oriented versus new work? All right, go ahead. Somebody else on funding for extension. That's not what I can talk about.
I don't think this is a question of how county staff get funded, so I'm going to throw it over to Bob.
I'm not sure, Melissa, I understand the question, or Melanie, in terms of that. I mean, it's, well, I just don't understand, I guess, the question itself.
Bob, let me chime in as a semi-outsider, and I can maybe clarify a couple things. Taking your example, if we give you some different information or different tools, that might make your ability to make recommendations to people in Purdue a bit easier or a bit more direct or accurate. So
Correct.
It's not changing your mission, it's just giving you some more information to work with to be more effective. So that's complementing what you're doing already.
Right.
Things like developing a mesonet are a whole different ballgame. It's not something, it's something you're partially doing already, but physically needs equipment, physically needs people to go out that is completely different outside of what exists right now to be able to do that well. So you need dollars to be able to do that sort of thing. And then you also need people to manage data, work on stations, create new information. Those aren't in other people's missions. Okay.
Right. So Beth, though, other mesonets around the country, I mean, the implication is not that they are funded by extension, are they?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think those, a lot of them just get support from the university administration. But some, maybe the states help fund it. So, and a lot of them are just, you know, trying to sell their data as well. And I know a lot of times, unfortunately, it is an expensive endeavor to have a mesonet. And I know even Michigan's administration went back and said, no, we're done funding this. Unfortunately, Jeff Andreessen was like, oh my goodness, do you realize how many agricultural people use our and fire weather data, and you can't just shut it down? And so I think he tried to make a case, but you know, that in itself is almost a full-time job, constantly, you know, hunting for dollars, trying to keep it running. I know even Kentucky's mesonet was at financial risk for a while. And, you know, even when we're talking communications and thinking of all the opportunities there, it's like, wow, I almost feel like I need to hire at least a part-time communications person to do this, because where do I find time, you know, in my day to do it? And that's the sort of funding. And then you have the obvious funding, such as if we had a paper snail mail newsletter that went out, who's paying the postage on that? Who's paying, you know, the paper for all of that? And so is that something that extension offices, if you send it digitally, they can all print it out locally in the county office and then distribute it across the county? I don't know if extension has funds for that. Does extension have funds to say, hey, we think this would be a very valuable thing to have a dedicated communications climate person? Though they could say, Beth, that's you. Didn't you get the memo? So I think it's that thing of where does extension play a role in helping to fund this sort of idea, this sort of climate services network?
I'm not high enough up the totem pole to answer that, Beth.
Right. I know. Hans kind of threw you under the bus with that.
Well, I think it speaks to Melanie's question of, you know, funding and support. It's complicated, right? It's not a direct ask. Resources are stretched thin, just like they are anywhere else. A lot of extension programs over the last decade or two have been getting cut, not just in our state, much more severely in other states, actually. And so the struggle is real and it is ongoing.
Well, but we did observe from the map that Beth had in her presentation that if you looked across the country, like Oklahoma and Nebraska and even Illinois had quite a density of mesonets, and you're just wondering what's different between those states and our state. You know, is it a matter of less end users interested in this technology? Is it a matter of funding, or what is the obstacle in the way to enable us to go from a state with 9 stations to a state with, 25 stations or something like that. And I don't know the answer, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I know Beth has been asking those same questions too, so she's on it. We had somebody else who was about to unmute, and I can't see the names in my current view.
Yeah, this is Tony.
There you go.
One of the things that the Indiana Water Monitoring Council has attempted to do is to pull together all the players across the state, so county, state, federal, and it's water quality and some quantity data, but to try and pull all of those and share what is being collected so everyone knows. And then also that allows to pull resources, funding resources, and also to identify gaps or holes, and then trying to figure out where that needs to be, how that needs to be accomplished. And so whether it's related to the Western Lake Erie Basin, algal blooms type issues, or whether it's the water that leaves the state at the Ohio and Wabash. So just kind of thinking about that of not saying we need another network or that, but there might be ways of doing that. And then that might be a way of going after those fundings, and especially being able to share between different groups. There's not a need to have 2 high quality data stations, collections right next to each other. If you had one just moved to the next county or something, then that might be able to fill in some of those holes as well. So just a thought.
And that was the Indiana Water Monitoring Council, or the?
Yes.
Okay. So that's an interesting thing to think about, right? Now we're thinking about what other kinds of networks, coalitions, collaborations exist that we can model from or piggyback onto, although I feel like climate services is unique enough that maybe we don't just get sucked into somebody else, right? We are our own thing. But thinking about operational models, and maybe this is a good question, in addition to our state partners, to our federal partners, are there other state climate services networks or other, like the Water Monitoring Council networks, that we should be looking to for inspiration of how these can be well done and successful?
I also wonder some of that data, because they have weather stations at some of those locations, if that is being coordinated and pulled into our needs for what's going on here. I'll just throw that out there, that there's various data collection going on across the state for water quality that I wonder if it's being matched with this. So we might be able to more cheaply, this weather station is already sitting there, but more cheaply being able, it might already be being done, I'm not sure.
So I guess one thing to think about as you ask the question of what other teams exist, if this were to be created for agriculture, we would have to think about then, does a representative report into Mike Ryan's Indiana Climate Services team that currently exists, or how they would interact as well?
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about this. And I mean, we have a good template with the climate services team, but I agree that this is a different, more targeted group. So I think we have to keep them separate. Now we can work in tandem. That's and there are probably going to be some folks that are on both teams, and that's fine, because we do that with the drought monitor team. So that would be a way to maintain the communication. But I've always kind of seen the climate services team as kind of more overarching and covering the broad spectrum of climate services versus just a specific area in agriculture. So that's kind of my thought. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Can you say that last part again? It got cut out for a moment on my end. You said they're separate, or they're?
What I was saying is that I think it's important to kind of keep them as separate entities, because where our climate services team here for the state kind of is more overarching, looks at all aspects of climate service, and there are a lot of them. This is more targeted with agriculture. So I think there needs to be a separate team. And my point was, you're probably going to have folks that are on both teams, and that's fine. And exchanging information and communicating regularly, I think that works fine too. That works really well with us and with Manuela and David Smith's drought monitor team. You know, that information fluidly goes back and forth.
And I agree with you, Mike, that we probably ought to consider keeping it as a separate focus team, because there's special needs for each organization, and there are points of interest that you want to delve into a little bit deeper. And if we tried to integrate all the ag stuff into your current climate team, it might end up driving some of the other people away because that's outside of their interest realm. So I would say if somebody from the ag industry wants to sit in on the overarching team, come join the party. But under the same token, understand that specific ag focus really needs to have a group that can delve into those ag issues. And the timing may be different. With seasonal growth patterns and everything, the timing may be very different between when we schedule the overarching team meetings versus the drought meetings versus an ag focus.
No, I agree, Manuela. And that's the thing. And for those who aren't familiar with our climate services team, the way we structure it is we have calls quarterly, so 4 a year. And Manuela's point is well taken there. Where we might schedule a call to talk about various items, you could have a more immediate concern for need to converse among ag interests, let's say at early green up in March and April, or if we're dealing with drought or excessive flooding situation or something like that at various points of the year. And the other thing I'll just mention, another team that we kind of run in tandem with is Silver Jackets, and Silver Jackets handles a lot when it comes to water resource, flooding, drought, you name it. There is plenty of space for a separate ag team, and I think would be a benefit because it would allow, as Manuela was saying, allow us to be more specific in targeting not only the main partners, but kind of focusing in on the more specific agricultural issues that we're facing here in the state.
So I just want to jump in here real quick because there's been a lot of data stuff and answering this question as well, right? So kind of what Mike's saying, right, especially from the federal standpoint, we have to kind of, especially because our funding, despite what budgets look like, our funding is very limited, right? So we have to figure out what is the best bang for our buck that's going to serve the most number of partners, right? And so that's one of the reasons why we have been kind of lagging in replacing our soil thermometer network. Because when the Mercury Reduction Act hit, that was identified as an ag issue, and we can't necessarily just cater to one sector when it comes to climate data, right? So we had to think about precip, and we had to think about overall temperatures. So soil thermometers have been kind of a like to have, and that's kind of where it stayed because we've had more priorities that keep pushing it back. So I would say, to kind of answer that question right there is how could we get something, say, from the federal level, again, talking about with the modernization, if you will, that the co-op network is going through, this would be a great time to start thinking about how to use your connections to get that message up the chain. For instance, we talked about the Oklahoma Mesonet, right? So that's why they are where they are at. They had the benefit of having Dr. Ken Crawford be in the right place at the right time and actually working with us I don't know if any of you remember a program called NEARON. I think it stood for Near Environmental Real-Time Observations Network or something like that. So that was kind of the basis of, hey, we need 5-minute real-time data. And so he kind of came on with a consulting with us to try to get that going. And they were going to cost like $100,000 or more a site. And then we realized, hey, the Weather Service is never going to get that funding. And so the program dried up, and he went back to Oklahoma with all this research data, and he was able to sprout their network based off of Neuron. We're kind of doing a mini Neuron right now. We're getting ready to, as a matter of fact, here in a couple of weeks, I'm getting ready to install the first one in our area of what's called a cell co-op site. So it's going to be our standard Fisher Porter weighing rain gauge, which if you have seen a co-op site, is the white rocket ship looking thing. And we're going to connect it to a max minimum temperature system. And it's going to have a cell card on there, and it's going to take that data and it's going to start transmitting long line every 5 minutes. And right now, that's kind of our Band-Aid as we try to get from where we are to where we need to be. So that's coming. See here, what other question I want to answer? Okay, so we're talking about bringing science up to a co-op standard. So I'm going to try to make this answer as short as possible. It's going to take a lot, right? Because what a lot of people don't really think about when they put out a personal weather network. So like a Davis Vantage Pro, one of the top of the line, right? That thermometer, if it's sited perfectly in ideal conditions, has a plus or minus half a degree tolerance. So we've used the word calibrated a lot here. Not very many temperature sensors are actually calibrated. What they do, and this is what we do, is a tolerance check, right? So we have a quote standard, and as long as it's within the tolerance, it's good. We have no way of actually calibrating. They either meet the tolerance or they don't. So if you're using personal networks and you're doing a comparison amongst two gauges, well, if one gauge is a half a degree warm, and the second one is a half a degree warm, but they can check next to each other as being in tolerance, if that makes sense. So you could actually have a gauge, if you're doing a comparison, you actually have a gauge as much of a degree out of tolerance. And the more gauges you check around off of each other, that tolerance just makes that gap wider. So I think it was Melanie was talking about having to make crop decisions with a 2 degree window, right? Well, if you're comparing personal stations that are sited poorly, those tolerances just get bigger. And the more personal stations you check off of, the bigger that error gap becomes. What we do, and what we have to do with every piece of equipment we field, is it has to go through that tolerance testing at our Sterling Field Support Center before it can get cleared to go in the field. So that's going to be the big thing, is thinking about those, because what most temperature sensors do, they don't actually measure temperature. If you're an engineer, you may know this already, but they measure resistance, right? And they can figure out the temperature based off the resistance on the line. So there's a lot of stuff that can factor in there. What we run into the most where we get squirrely temperatures is, most of these shelters look like pre-made beehives, right? So somebody will get a wasp in there and they'll go pull out the wasp spray. Well, a lot of wasp spray has grease on it. When you get grease on metal, you mess with the resistance of the metal, and now the temperatures are gone. And you may never think that, hey, I sprayed my temperature sensor with wasp spray. Now my sensor is not accurate, right? So I think I answered a bunch of the questions that were there when it came to sensors and data and all that kind of good stuff. But I'll stop talking now, so there's a little bit of time left for other people. But if there are any other questions, let me know.
Well, I think if we have some kind of newsletter or website and we need some specific questions answered on data citing and all of that, we know exactly who to call. And thank you so much. That was very, very good. And those were, there were a lot of questions in the chat there. So I do want to be mindful of our time. We're at 12:20. We're supposed to end at 12:30. Is that correct, Beth? 12:30. So just to kind of wrap up what we've been talking about here, first, I do want to mention, don't forget to go to the Padlet site. If you're able to, you can keep sticking items in there. I'm going to put the link to it again in the chat. We talked quite a bit about what this network might look like. I think we have a few leadership models to consider. It sounds like a non-state or federal entity might have more of the flexibility to direct such a network, such as the State Climate Office. We talked a lot about needs, such as, we already have a lot of tools available. How do we get it out to people? So this education and awareness piece. certainly being part of this network, certainly rallying together to pursue new opportunities, whether it's with stations or with value-added tools. So I feel like there's a lot of directions we can go here. We don't necessarily have the answer of what we do, but we have a lot of follow-ups. Beth, is there anything else that you'd like us to chat about here before I turn it back over to you for our wrap-up?
I can't think of anything in particular. I was going to say that so we will build a website just on this meeting, and then email all of the participants of this meeting, and that website will have the list of the participants, contacts, affiliations. So if you're ever like, oh, who is that one person, and so forth, I'll try and post as many presentations as I can. I need to get permission from the presenters, obviously. The agenda, I think there's been a lot of links shared, so we'll try and organize those links somehow. So it might at first just be a sorted, organized list of links, which obviously isn't the most friendliest way to do it, but it was a lot of information to take on. And then I'm thinking, because there seems to be interest in having a climate services ag network for the state, I'll probably reach out to folks on the planning team and see where do we go next? What is the next logical step? So hopefully there will be action that you will see after this summit. But there's a lot of great information. I know for me, I got to hear what is out there. I even learned of stuff that is available like on drought.gov and other websites. I'm like, wow, I go to this website all the time and I didn't realize this product was there. But I love the session where we got to hear from the panelists and, their frustrations and the ideal, gosh, it'd be great if we had this, and this, how we use the data. Because that is something that we often don't hear about. We go about our daily jobs, but we don't get to engage directly. So I appreciate your time and your candor on where things are lacking, and then timing, how some needed this information in this season and other seasons. So I really do hope that we can move forward with what we had and not make this a one and done meeting. I'm not saying that we want to have a regular summit. Maybe we will, but I hope that at least we all stay in touch and can continue to get feedback from each other and expand the group. I think it would be great to have a lot more people involved, or at least on a listserv or somehow, so that they're able to receive this information and disseminate it. From the planning team, is there any final comments that you want to say, or you feel like I just haven't covered? You want to let folks know about?
Beth, I'm not on the planning team, but let me just, as the old coot in the room, years and years ago, when there was an NWS group at Purdue on campus right across the street, that really facilitated that kind of communication. And when that was disbanded and moved off, that was a great loss for people like me, in the crops world and the extension world, because the same thing has happened with USDA NAS. Once they sort of left town, again, we all of a sudden, that camaraderie, that familiarity was gone. And I really miss that all these years. And I don't know how we do it today to restore that kind of thing, but that's what makes these kinds of networks really click, is when you've got that easy access, easy camaraderie. I don't know how we restore it, but again, for those of you that weren't around back then, I mean, we had this really great relationship between ag meteorology, as you said, Beth, the State Climate Office, NWS, all sitting, together. That was great. That was wonderful.
Yeah, and the state climate offices, I think I mentioned in the very beginning yesterday, there is no consistent funding for them. So there are some offices out there that it is kind of almost 0% funded. These are designated faculty who drew the short straw, essentially, and said, oh, and by the way, because you know something about weather, you are now the state climatologist, and they have no support staff, they have no operational funds. And then you have other states, I think of Colorado and North Carolina come to mind, where they have huge staffs, very well supported by the university and very well engaged. The people across the state seem to know who they are. And I was really excited when Purdue was recruiting for the position that I applied for, because it seems like they were intentionally trying to shift away from just assigning it to a faculty person and having it be someone that's more extension focused. So I think that's the problem when you go from one state to the next as well. And you see, well, why does this state have all of these resources and this state doesn't seem to be doing very well? You know, kind of step back and say, well, how is the state climate office being funded? Is this a well-supported thing? Do they have a big crew? Do they have an operating budget? Glenn, I think you were going to say a few words.
I was just going to, on behalf of everyone, just thank you for doing such a great job. I think this has been a fabulous event, and I believe I speak for everybody when I say I learned a ton from this, and I think this has really been a not just the start and finish, but a great start to a lot of relationships and moving forward. So I was really excited, and thanks to the entire Hans and Melissa and some of the other folks that put a lot of thought into this and organization. Dennis, I don't think Doug's on here either, but we've had a number of meetings, and it's really nice to see this come to fruition. So I just wanted to add that, and thank you.
Great.
I also wanted to ask, there's so much information today, and although I took screen captures of it all, I really enjoyed making the acquaintance of many of the state climatology office partners. Also enjoyed the opportunity to present what we're doing here as a producer / researcher. But also I wanted to ask the recording. I know that these sessions have been recorded. Will there be a link that comes out that we could follow up and try to digest some of the information a little more thoroughly at our leisure?
Hans, did you want to handle that?
I just put the link to day one's recording in the chat. I'm going to get day two's recording done either today or tomorrow, and then maybe we can get that out to everybody in some way, shape, or form. Of course, I believe we're planning to have a lot of information put on the Indiana State Climate Office website.
Yeah, and this website as well. So we'll, like, on the website, we can have the recordings of day 1 and 2, but we can also, with the agenda, make those hyperlinked agendas. So you can go through and say, oh, who was speaking for that Coco Rods talk, and it can have links and so forth organized there.
That's
and
fantastic.
Hans achieved the first goal of the meeting. He said he wanted to have the recording of day 1 available by the end of day 2. Score.
Woohoo! Way to go, Hans.
It looks like Melissa just posted again an updated list of the attendees who introduced themselves in the chat. I don't think I ever introduced myself in the chat, and nor did I introduce myself today, but hopefully y'all are getting to know me. That's all. All right, well, I see we've hit 12:30. Again, I appreciate your time and dedication to stick with us through these 2 mornings, and hopefully that this will not fizzle out. And I think we have a lot of momentum right now, and we want to carry that forward. Thanks for the applause, Tony. And have a great rest of the day, rest of the week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.